Good evening and welcome to the January 23rd, 2024 meeting of the Portsmouth Zoning Board of Adjustment. Our first item of business is election of officers for the next year. And if anybody would like to say anything, that would be great. And
Do we also, I mean, or do we have, I'm sorry, but I didn't realize that. Do we have nominees already, or?
no, it all happens here.
Okay, well, is this the right time to make a nomination?
I believe so.
I'd like to nominate.
Oh, sorry. Are we on?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
yes,
maybe
sorry.
too far back.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you.
Sorry,
Okay.
Jim, that was my fault. I was just lounging in the back there. Anyway, I'd like to nominate Phyllis Eldridge as the chair.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I guess I will too. Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored. We now need to elect a vice chair.
Do you want me to do all the work? or-
You don't have to do all the work.
I'll make a motion to appoint Beth Margison as vice chair.
Okay, would you accept that?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well, congratulations.
That's exciting.
The next item of business is approval of the minutes of the December 19th, 2023 meeting. Any changes, yes, Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 3 of the minutes, which is page 6 of our packet, there's about halfway down the page talking about how I moved to deny the appellant's request. So the sentence begins, Mr. Ram said he made the original motion to deny it and then moved to grant it the second time. Just think that needs a little bit more clarification. So I would like that sentence to read, Mr. Ram said that he made the motion to deny the original application and then had moved to grant the revised application. That would better reflect what I took place. And then the next sentence, just towards the end of that sentence, it says, review the information.
Recording in progress.
Present what was necessary relief to the applicant needed to move forward. It should really be the necessary relief the applicant needed to receive to move forward.
Okay.
And then on page 9 of the minutes, which is page 12 of our packet, again, right around the middle of that page, there's a sentence that begins, Mr. Ram said, the present application was more in conformance and the nature of the variance requests much less imposing. Just it should be, that's a relative term, so it should be then the initial application.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
Okay.
Just a couple corrections. On that page that we were just on, page 9, in the middle of the first big paragraph, the line that ends with the word area, just put in the word zoning after area, please. And I have one more. It is on page 14 of the minutes in the big paragraph in the middle, close to the bottom, 4 lines down. The zoning ordinance doesn't deal with the bulky issue, should be bulking issue.
Good catch.
And that's it.
Okay.
I just have two. On page 2 of the minutes, which is page 5 of our packet, at the very last sentence, it says, Vice Chair Margison said she disagreed because there was a presumption of reasonableness and lawfulness, and they was supposed to have 4 ZBA actions after that. And then on page 5 of the minutes, page 8 in our packet, the last full paragraph, the second line, instead of clear that there would not be more than one dwelling unit, it should be should. Clear that there should not be more. And I wish they could correct my errors on the last thing, but that's okay.
Any other, yes? Mr.
Just
Rossi?
one, on page 7, under the heading "Speaking to the Petition," in the first line of the second paragraph, it reads, "Currently, the property was that made it practical to have the full allotment." It should be impractical.
Okay.
You see where I am at?
Yeah. Well, I'm not looking at mine, but yes, I understand from the context that
Okay,
makes sense.
thank you.
Any others? Okay, is there anyone who'd like to make motion to approve the minutes with these changes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nobody. Thank you.
Can I grab this page?
Which do you want? Oh, but I usually have one.
I know. Do you need one?
I like having it. Okay, so the next item of business is old business. The Masteron Restaurants, Inc. at 2255 Lafayette Road requests a one-year extension to the variances granted on February 15th, 2023.
Two.
Is there anyone to? Yes.
I'll move to approve a one-year extension.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, go ahead.
The zoning ordinance allows for a one-time, one-year extension when good cause is demonstrated by the applicant. And here the applicant says that they are working with city staff to satisfy the conditions of the approval of the wetland conditional use permit and the site plan. Building permit hasn't issued. They anticipate starting in spring of 2024, so I think that's sufficient reason for an extension.
Okay, is there any discussion? Mr. Ram?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a lot of times I'm kind of a sort of a voice for restraint in granting these. However, in this case, I do think this is the exact kind of project that we should be granting additional time to. It has a lot of complexity associated with it, certainly a lot of various approvals that are necessary. All those do tend to take time and are, understandable. So I do think this is a good, positive request, and I support approving it.
Okay, thank you. If that is it, then all in favor of the postponement?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Oh, okay, then, good. I'm sorry, I thought you were looking at me.
I thought we had to do an individual.
No,
Roll call vote, Tom?
No, I think it's okay,
Okay.
yeah. The next item of business is 168 Lincoln Avenue, a request for a rehearing. What do we think?
This is not a public hearing, right?
No, this is not a public hearing, this is us.
I forget, do we have to make motions? Yeah, we do. Okay.
Yes, Ms. Murchison.
I would move that we not rehear it. And if I get a second, I will say why.
Second.
So I voted against this application both times it came before us. I don't agree with our decision. However, the request for a rehearing is based on the Fisher v. Dover issue, and I believe that was addressed at the beginning of the hearing. Majority of the board, or perhaps unanimous vote of the board, said that they did not think it was implicated, so I would not vote to rehear this.
Okay, discussion? Okay, then the motion is to deny the rehearing. A yes is to deny. And I'm going to do a roll call on this, okay? Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Ms. Geffert?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so the rehearing is denied. And at this point, I'd like to take item D under new business out of order for postponement, if I get a motion to do that.
Madam Chair, I move that we take item D out of order.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's out of order. What do you think of postponement?
Was that in our packet? I guess I didn't see.
It was in our packet,
Okay.
yes, before it was taken out of our packet. Do you mean?
The postponement request came in this afternoon. It was emailed.
Okay.
Okay, oh, yes. It's for 413 Lafayette Road.
Which is the care facility by the high school.
Yes. Yes.
Just a point of order, does that need to be read into the record?
I don't believe so, but we can do that if it would make you feel more comfortable.
No, I just was curious. I guess I apologize, I did not have an opportunity to see my email. Is it possible for the planning staff to summarize the reasons for the request for postponement?
Sure. Is that okay with you?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so I got a email from the applicant team that they were looking into getting a survey of the property. So it's essentially, they're getting more information.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we postpone item D for,
Thank you. Is there a second to Mr.
Second.
Matson's? Okay. Discussion? All in favor?
but, yeah. Just that we would postpone it till
sorry.
the next meeting
Yes.
in
Do you
February.
think, did they indicate if that would be enough time? Do you know?
They didn't indicate a time frame. However, I think it's appropriate if we postpone it to the next meeting, and if we need more time, we can assess that.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Ram?
Yeah, so for my second, I agree with what Mr. Mattson said, and I was kind of concerned with the open space coverage being listed in the staff report as more info needed. So that was going to be a significant concern of mine had we heard this case tonight. So I appreciate that sounds like that they're taking additional efforts to answer that open space question, and I think that that was important. So therefore, I recommend approval of the postponement.
Is there any discussion? Okay, then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, then the motion passes, and it is postponed till our February meeting.
Could who was the second on that vote?
Ms.
Okay,
Mr.
thank you.
Ram? Okay, before we get started on the public hearings, I just want to remind the petitioners that you have 15 minutes, and if you think you're going to go over that, please talk to us before the meeting and we'll vote on whether we want to give you some extra time. If you're speaking to, for, or against, there is a 5-minute rule. Okay? All right. New business, item A, the request of Jerry Portsmouth 501 Inc., owner, for property located at 505 US Route 1 bypass, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing structure and construct a new hotel with a drive-through restaurant, which requires the following. 1, special exception from 10.440, use number 10.40 hotel, where it is permitted by special exception. 2, variance from section 10.113.20 to allow parking spaces between the principal building and a street. 3, variance from section 10.1113.41 for parking located 1 foot from the lot line where 40 feet is required. 4, variance from section 10.575 to allow dumpsters to be located 1 foot from the lot line where 10 feet is required. 5, variance from section 10.835.32 to allow 1 foot between the lot line and drive-through and bypass lanes where 30 feet is required for each. And 6, a variance from section 10.835.31 to allow 37 feet between the menu and speaker board and the front lot line where 50 feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 234, Lot 5, and lies within the general business district. It almost took me 15 minutes to read that. So,
I think we're going to be
welcome.
really close, but I think we should be able to do it in 15. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the board. I'm Attorney John Boson, and I represent the applicant. With me this evening from Gary Hotels is Karen Whitman and Ankur Patel. They're sitting in the back of the room. We're also accompanied by our site engineer, Patrick Crimmins from Ty and Bond. Gary Hotel manages about 45 hotels throughout New England. They currently own and operate the Port Inn, which is located on the bypass, Port Inn was built in 1957, and it has 56 motel rooms. I know, dating all of us, isn't it? The proposed project involves the demolition of the existing motel and the construction of a 124-room hotel that will operate under the Cambria brand. The hotel will also have first-floor parking, and it'll be a one-story Starbucks restaurant with an accessory drive-through. I would also like to mention that this project has been through it's been through a planning board conceptual review hearing. We had that last May. We also went to a TAC workshop and a Conservation Commission work session in June. So we've been at this project for a long time. There are many site improvements that I would like to invite Patrick to come up to the podium, walk you through the site plan, then I'll come back up, talk about the special exception and variance criteria. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening. For the record, I'm Patrick Crimmins. So the site situated at 505 Route 1 bypass. Steph, if you want to scroll to that aerial first, I guess, just to set, kind of the existing condition.
Is this the right one, or?
You got it. Yep. So here's that existing site. We did overlay the line work, which isn't showing through great in this PDF. I apologize, but I guess what I just wanted to do was bring this up first to kind of give you the sense of the existing condition. It is a unique site in that it is bound in all directions, bound by the Route 1 bypass, the highly traveled state highway, bound by Coakley Road, and then to the rear it's completely bound by the Hodgson Brook. So within that, you can see from this aerial photograph that it is largely completely developed within that envelope. There's pavement all the way out right to Coakley Road, right up to the edge along the Route 1 bypass. There's existing buildings and parking. They're both set right up next to the Hodgson Brook. In fact, the pavement goes right up to the bank itself, and we have buildings even situated closer than 25 feet to the Hodgson Brook. So if you want to go to that site plan now, Steph. So the proposed project, staying in that bound envelope that we have between the two streets that both, because it is a corner lot, are front lots, and that rear Hodgson Brook, we're trying to situate what is a 122 key, or 124 key, I apologize, hotel and Starbucks with a drive-through, which you can see here. Just starting along Coakley Road. Currently, there are 3 curb cuts along Coakley Road. There's one really, let's see if this will work. Yep, one, if you remember from that large aerial, one really large kind of, it's like a parking area curb cut here. It almost expands this width. There's a second 2-way curb cut here, and there's a third 2-way curb cut right here. In addition, along the Route 1 bypass, there's also a curb cut right in, right out. So as part of this project, we're looking to improve the access management by minimizing the curb cuts. We're going to eliminate the curb cuts in the Route 1 bypass. We're going to eliminate this 2-way curb cut in the center. The primary entrance into the site, which is set about 415 feet back from the intersection, is a 2-way curb cut coming in to allow access into the site and into the rear along the drive-through. And then we are proposing a second curb cut, which will be a right-out exit only, and that's to alleviate traffic coming through the Starbucks drive-through, so we're not pushing them back through the site. We're getting them out to the signal and queued up. With respect to the layout itself, we've tried to work within those developed parameters and improve the setback from the Hodgson Brook. The environmental benefit of this project is one of the key items that we feel helps with making this project a better site than what it is in the existing condition. You can see here the buildings itself centrally located in the site between the road and the Hodgson Brook. It is set in this manner. We've looked at a number of configurations to try to make it work, but the most efficient layout was to centrally locate the building here to allow for a 2-way parking access along the front of the hotel and to allow for proper circulation and queuing for the Starbucks drive-through. You'll see here we do have that drive-through queued up. I think we're showing 14 cars. You could probably actually squeeze a 15th car. Starbucks requirements are a 12-car queue typically, so we're actually exceeding that requirement. So again, entrance two-way traffic this way, primarily with the hotels, parking, and then also allowing for parking in front of the Starbucks, the circulation around the site. Here with the building, John mentioned it, we are proposing parking on the first floor of the building, again, to meet parking demand requirements, and then try to, again, to the extent that we can, push as far away from the brook as possible. I mentioned the queue here, the Starbucks, and then in the back, you'll recall how I had mentioned, particularly in this location, the pavement right up to the edge. You can see how we're pulling all of that in with landscape buffer enhancement, which I'll touch upon in more detail. With respect to parking, the proposed parking requirement for the city of Portsmouth for this site is 177 spaces. We are going to need to seek a conditional use permit from the planning board for that. We've performed what would be a parking demand analysis using Institute of Transportation Engineers parking generation manual. And from that, that demand calculation from ITE is 112 parking spaces, so we're providing the minimum parking that would be required to meet that demand. Again, that's going to need to be reviewed by the Technical Advisory Committee and also by the Planning Board, but we have reviewed the parking in detail, and in the interest of minimizing impervious surface on the site, trying to pull it away from the brook to the extent we can and provide the parking that is sufficient to meet the demand of the site, we're proposing 112 spaces based on that parking demand calculation. With respect to traffic, I'm not going to get into detailed traffic here, but I just wanted to explain it a little bit. Obviously with this being a state highway right there, NHDOT is going to review this in detail. In fact, we've already had pre-application meetings with these folks. We have scoped the study area with them and studied it. We studied the two signalized intersections at the Coakley Cottage Route 1 bypass intersection. We studied the bypass Borthwick Hodgson Way intersections, and we studied the driveway intersections, and those were all at the direction of NHDOT in our pre-application meeting, which also involved the city of Portsmouth itself. High level, looking at capacity, I'll just read from the conclusions. Again, this needs to go through a lot of review with DOT back and forth. I recognize that, but our initial findings basically show that the study area, I'm just going to read it. The study area intersections will generally continue to operate at the same or acceptable level of service under the build condition as compared to the no build condition for both 2025 opening year and the 2035 design year, with minimal increases in delay. What we're seeing is those minimal increases in delay can be taken care of when looking at adjusting the timing of the signals. So again, that's a very high level. We have analyzed it. We're thinking about traffic. We recognize how important it is. Just wanted to touch on that. It is going to get a thorough review, both at the Technical Advisory Committee and the New Hampshire Department of Environment, NHDOT. Now, with respect to the environmental benefit of the site, I mentioned at the open how the site is fully developed out within that envelope. It sprawls right out to the edge of the Hodgson Brook, and what we're trying to do with this layout is, to the extent feasible, while still meeting the parking demand, providing a layout that provides circulation and queuing for the Starbucks. We are going to be removing 6,750 square feet of impervious surface from the wetland buffer, which we think will be a significant improvement for the site itself. Within that 25-foot no disturb, which is in the ordinance, we're actually eliminating all pavement and building. And we're also pushing all the buildings out more than 50 feet from the Hodgson Brook. In addition to just removing pavement and trying to set it back, we're also going to implement a detailed buffer enhancement and restoration plan, which will have to be reviewed by the Conservation Commission and Planning Board through that conditional use permit. We're going to require a wetland conditional use permit. Within the existing vegetated areas along the brook, we're proposing to remove invasive species to enhance the existing buffer. And in addition, again, where we're pulling out all of this pavement and building along the edge, We're proposing to go back in and restore that buffer area with native plantings and bring it to a natural vegetated state that provides an enhanced buffer to protect the brook. Lastly, with the existing condition, it's built in 1957. Not much of improvement has been done to it with respect to stormwater. Right now, it just sheet flows directly into the brook, or there is some catch basins in the site that just point discharges directly into the brook with no treatment, no detention whatsoever. With this site improvement, what we're proposing, we will collect, detain, and treat stormwater. We're going to have to do that as part of the city's stormwater regulations and also as part of the NHDES alteration of terrain. But we expect that the stormwater enhancements would also be a significant environmental benefit for the site. So with respect to the relief, I'll just go through quickly. One, we are seeking that reduction in off-street parking from the front lot line. We are providing 1 foot here, where, currently in the existing condition, it is also 1 foot. So we believe it's keeping in with what the existing character is of the site, and also in particular, where it's up along that highly traveled highway. It's a little different for the front yard itself. And we propose, obviously, nice landscaping to buffer the edge along Coakley Road, and then along this edge as well. For the reduction in the dumpster location from where we're providing 1 foot where 10 foot's required, we have selected this location here. We do have 2 dumpsters on site, one being for the hotel back here, but this one in particular is located in proximity to the Starbucks. That location was selected because of the proximity to the Starbucks, but also given site circulation. Mostly, if you're traveling the bypass heading south, the grade at this location is actually 5 to 6 feet lower than the existing road. And then you also have the guardrail, and there's existing vegetation along this edge that already screens it. So those dumpsters are going to be set down. They're going to be screened. You're probably not even really going to be able to see them I drove by it again tonight looking at the existing condition. We'll enhance it with additional landscaping, but also leave what existing vegetation is already providing a screening here and leaving that set down. For the reduction in the drive-through facilities from the front lot line, the menu board and speaker itself actually exceed that 50-foot setback. It's about 70 feet from the Route 1 bypass. It's the window itself that is 37 feet where 50 feet is required. Again, that was keeping in with the site circulation to allow for the queuing. Just given the proximity to the highway, we thought this was appropriate. And then lastly, for the parking spaces between a principal building and street, again, I mentioned we looked hard at how to best efficiently lay this site out and try to improve the environmental conditions out here and provide buffer impact reduction and buffer enhancement. So that's why you'll see that as designed to allow for the parking for the hotel in front of the building and to allow for the site circulation and queuing for the Starbucks, we are seeking relief for parking between the building and the street.
Thank you, Patrick. With that background, I'd like to start first with a special exception. First, the proposed use as a hotel is permitted within this district by special exception. Second, the proposed use will pose no hazard to the public or adjacent properties on account of potential fires, explosion, or release of toxic materials. There won't be any toxic materials or explosives or accelerants stored on site. And to the best of our knowledge, there's never been any of these events to occur since it's been a motel in 1957. Fourth, there'll be no traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity. The existing use is comprised as a motel. The proposed use, again, will require a site plan review from the planning board and a driveway permit from New Hampshire DOT, where the traffic impact study will be required for approval. The project will also require a conditional use permit from the planning board, and again, as Patrick mentioned, utilizing data from the ITE parking generation manual for the preliminary parking demand analysis. The average peak parking demand for a 124-room hotel is 99 parking spaces. The average peak parking demand for the Starbucks is 13, So based on this, the total peak parking demand for the project is 112 spaces, which is being provided by this project. Fifth, there'll be no excessive demand on municipal services, including but not limited to water, sewer, waste disposal, fire, and fire protection, and schools, police protection. None of these services are really implicated by the project. And finally, the project will result in no significant increase in stormwater runoff onto adjacent property and streets. And currently, as Patrick mentioned, the motel goes right up to Hodgson's Brook, and the applicant intends to remove all the buildings within 50 feet of Hodgson's Brook and all the pavement within 25 feet of Hodgson's Brook, resulting in a significant improvement over the existing conditions. Site currently has no stormwater treatment either. As part of the site improvements on this project, the applicant will collect and treat all the water and all the stormwater before it goes into the brook. So given that, we do believe we meet the criteria for the special exception, and I would like to move on to the variance criteria. First, granting the variances will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance nor contrary to the public interest. The test for whether or not granting a variance would be contrary to the public interest or contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance is whether or not the variance is being granted would substantially alter the characteristics of the neighborhood or threaten the health, safety, and welfare of the public. The proposed use fits well in the mix of hotels and other commercial uses in this neighborhood. A new modern code-compliant hotel will improve the health, safety, and welfare of the public. The improvements to Hodgson's Brook also support this conclusion, and the project will require further review and approval by the planning board and a review by the Conservation Commission, further assuring public health, safety, and welfare. Next, substantial justice will be done by granting the variances, and whether or not substantial justice will be done by granting the variances requires the board to conduct a balancing test. If the hardship upon the owner outweighs any benefit to the general public in denying the variances, then substantial justice will be done by granting the variances. In this case, there's no benefit to the public in denying the variances that are not outweighed by hardship upon the owner. The existing motel already violates many of the sections of the zoning ordinance that we seek relief from. The project was designed to place these buildings and structures as far away from Hodgson's Brook as possible. And we're going to remove impervious surfaces adjacent to the brook of 6,750 square feet, and stormwater management infrastructure will be introduced. With respect to the relief needed for the Starbucks menu board, the fact that the speaker itself will be adjacent to the highway alleviates the noise concerns that the ordinance seeks to protect. So any loss to the applicant clearly outweighs any benefit to the general public. Next, the value of surrounding properties will not be diminished by the granting of these variances. This proposal will bring a modern, state-of-the-art, code-compliant hotel to the property with the Starbucks restaurant, which the general public enjoys. The area is also surrounded by similar uses, so the value of surrounding properties will not be negatively impacted in any way. Next, there are special conditions with this property that result in hardship. This property is a unique site, has unique constraints because it's a corner lot bounded by two streets to the front and Hodgson's Brook to the rear. The existing conditions are non-compliant with respect to the front building setback, parking setbacks from the front lot line, and parking is located between the principal building and the street along both frontages. Runoff from the existing impervious surfaces directly discharges into Hodgson Brook without any stormwater treatment. The existing built environment impacts the 100-foot wetland buffer adjacent to Hodgson's Brook with both buildings and parking. The existing condition includes approximately 36,000 square feet of total impervious surfaces impacted within the 100-foot buffer. Within that total wetland buffer impact, approximately 4,000 square feet is located within 25 feet of the brook, where the ordinance seeks to protect the 25-foot natural vegetative buffer. Also, structures are located within the 50-foot wetland buffer with existing building setbacks as close to 24 feet to the brook. While the proposed project seeks similar existing conditions for parking, the proposed project will now fully comply with the front building setback requirement and, more importantly, will provide meaningful improvement to Hodgson's Brook. This project will result in an 18% net overall reduction of impervious surfaces within 25 feet of the brook and return those areas to a natural vegetative buffer strip that will consist of natural plantings. The project will locate all buildings greater than 50 feet from the brook. In addition, the project's stormwater management system will collect and treat all water runoff collected by the impervious surfaces before it's discharged to the brook. The science behind all this supports that by doing all this, Hodgson's Brook will be improved in a meaningful way. The use here is also reasonable use. The proposed hotel is permitted here by special exception in this zone. It's consistent with the intent of the general business zone and the existing use. And the Starbucks is also permitted in this zone as well. Lastly, there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the ordinance as it's applied to this particular property. All the variance relief requested here is driven by the existing site restraints and the applicant's desire to make meaningful improvements to Hodgson's Brook. The relief,
I'm just going to remind you that you are well over your time now.
I am absolutely almost done, too. I apologize. Relief requested here will not frustrate the purpose of these requirements in their application of this property. So for all these reasons, the applicant requests approval of both the special exception and the variances as advertised. And I apologize for running over time.
Are there any questions for the petitioner? Ms. Margison?
So I have a question on the variance criteria and on the special exception. The argument is that because of Hodgson's Brook and the placement because of Hodgson's Brook and because it's a corner lot, those are your special conditions. I want to kind of revisit that a little bit because the building is being reoriented towards Coakley Road. And the Starbucks is being put on the side of it. It seems to me that it's not Hodgson's Brooks that's driving the variance request, it's the larger hotel and the Starbucks. So could you just address that?
Well, I think what makes this site unique, though, is the fact that, the corner lot is justification. I think we're part of the basis of what makes this site unique is that, we have limited room to work with. And to make these meaningful improvements to the brook, it dictates a certain, a certain program. We think this program will, as Patrick mentioned, it's not going to impact the traffic in a negative way. We think it will handle the parking that's on site. We think that there's many public benefits to improving the brook. So when you throw all that into the mix, this is the program that the client came up with that we felt maximize the highest and best use of the site, recognizing its unique qualities. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but.
So let's go back to the special exception. Thank you. Let's go back to the special exception criteria, particularly number 4. It's no creation of a traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity. I understand you spent a lot of time talking about parking. That's not within the purview of this board. It's the increase in the level of the traffic congestion in the vicinity. You're going from a 56-room hotel to a 124-room hotel, and then you have the Starbucks on top of that. And so I'm just wondering, in terms, and you're also reorienting it so that all of the traffic is now going to be going down Coakley Avenue because there's no more curb cuts on Route 1. Further down Coakley Avenue, there's like a hotel and like a plumbing supply place, but beyond that, it's all residential. I was wondering if, while you're going through TAC or Planning Board, if you had any kind of trip generation reports that says exactly how many cars this is going to be drawing into your lot.
Patrick may be better equipped to answer that.
I will. So based on the ITE data, the project is expected to generate 81 new trips during the weekday morning peak hour, which is 49 entering and 32 exiting, 70 new trips during the weekday afternoon peak hour, so that's 36 entering, 34 exiting, and 131 new trips during the Saturday midday peak hour, which is 70 entering, 61. This trip generation estimate does include a credit for the existing hotel that will be replaced, and also pass-by credit for the coffee shop trips, but no credit for internal trips was taken. But I guess that answers your question.
Okay, so that is a substantial increase in the level of traffic, because those trip generations are new, correct?
Those trips are new, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
But the findings for the intersections and impacts themselves is that generally we're not increasing or decreasing the level of service despite those additional peaks. So the signals are intended to operate at the same level of service. And with some signal timing improvements, that would be the case.
And what are you expected to get more traffic? Is most of the traffic coming off of Route 1 or down Coakley the other way?
It would be coming off of the Route 1 bypass.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Ram?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not sure who is going to want to answer these, but your first page of your applicant's narrative, second paragraph, you say the proposed project consists of the demolition of the existing motel and the construction of a 5-story, 124-key hotel. What's a key? I guess I don't.
It's the keys, the hotel room,
Okay, so
It's
it's
a
124 room. hotel.
124 room.
Okay, and the current hotel is, as you indicated, 56 rooms?
56, yeah.
Okay. Going down to the site plan, so that's your page 40 of our packet. So trying to understand the 1-foot setback to a bypass, I didn't see any dimension on the side, on the site plan for that. I'm presuming it's where there's a road that kind of comes right up close to the property line along the Route 1 bypass. Is that what it's referring to?
Right here.
Okay. And then the reason for putting the dumpsters, you have 2 dumpsters that are at the far end of the hotel project, but you're putting these 2 here, and I understand it seems to be related to the Starbucks, but if you could explain more why that particular location was selected and not one that might be able to be in full compliance with our zoning ordinance.
Sure. You are correct. It is to provide a dumpster within proximity of the Starbucks, so that Starbucks is not carrying trash out across the hotel. The location itself was selected due to the circulation of the site and, as I explained in my presentation, the existing topography and screening from the road. Given the change in grade that you have here, it's a 5 to 6 foot drop, plus you got a 3-foot guardrail and existing vegetation. There's a natural screen here that you're not going to see this dumpster. You also have this added length of distance, which exceeds 10 feet from the road itself. The other option would be, if we were going to comply, we'd have to look at putting it at the front door of the Starbucks, which would not be attractive, where this is more appropriate. It's screened from the road. It's screened from the public view.
Okay. So part of my concerns with this project is that if we look at the staff memo on page 31, you're asking for 1 foot where 40-foot minimum is required, 1 foot where 10-foot minimum is required, and 1 foot where 30-foot minimum is required for 3 of these variances. And then going down to our the current aerial view that you provided, which is page 47 of our packet. Okay, so the 1 foot up against the property line for parking, you kind of mentioned, well, the current site has that, but I'm looking at this and I see, yeah, it's got it in one tiny corner up against Coakley where you have maybe like 4 parking spots, something along those lines. Admittedly, there's like 1 more parking spot that's up against the property line. That's a parallel spot here. I'm trying to understand why, in the spirit of the ordinance that we have, why are you proposing, looking at your site plan on page 40, you're now talking about a 1 foot setback along the whole length of the property line along Coakley Road to go and put your parking in. And I'm trying to understand why you didn't consider to better adhere to the spirit of the ordinance of what we are trying to accomplish with this change, which is really to try and drive parking to the rear of structures and buildings closer to roads. So why weren't you able to go and relocate the hotel up against Coakley Road and include all the parking behind it?
Because the layout for this program would not fit if we were to push the hotel up along the road and adhere to setback. The circulation wouldn't allow for the program the way it lays out now.
Okay, so circulation, so again, this is a choice of circulation, the way it lays out now. And what I'm hearing is that the Starbucks seems to be driving this, this request, along with really three of the other requests for variances here, which is the dumpster, which they need the additional dumpsters, the drive-through bypass being 1 foot versus 30, and the menu board relief. So a lot of this is being driven by the Starbucks. Is there any consideration to eliminating that aspect of the project so you could bring this more in compliance with what the zoning ordinance is looking for out of new structures on properties like this?
Ankur Patel, Gary Hotels. So, the simple answer is that there's no project without the Starbucks. I mean, it's a feasibility analysis. So, cost of construction are considered, and having Starbucks as a tenant is factored into offsetting some of those costs as well. So,
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
And then one last question, if I may, Madam Chair, towards the special exception, and I'm not sure if you're the right person to answer, but you said that, going back to the traffic issues that that the Vice Chair was speaking to, you said that you've been in conversations with the New Hampshire Department of Transportation regarding this site. My understanding is that there is a vision by the New Hampshire DOT to eventually eliminate the traffic signal at the end of Coakley Road, with the idea that traffic would be using a crossover between Coakley and Borthwick so that we can funnel more of the traffic into that signaled intersection. Is that something that came up in your discussions with New Hampshire DOT, and how does that factor into your what you're proposing here?
Yes, it is. Actually, it was part of our pre-application meeting. We've had to study it in both ways. So we've looked at it from a median standpoint, and we've looked at it at keeping the existing intersections. I think we'll have to see how DOT wants us to proceed.
Okay, so you haven't gotten super far along on that discussion at this point?
We've done the traffic analysis. We haven't moved forward with submitting it yet because if we didn't get granted the relief, we don't have the project. So.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome. Mr. Ross?
I also have a question about the special exception criteria. Criterion number 5 is no excessive demand on municipal services, including sewer. Sewage capacity is not unlimited. It's not cheap. We just paid $91 million for a renovated sewage treatment facility here in Portsmouth, and it has a finite capacity. So how did you ascertain that moving from 59 to 124 rooms in this hotel, plus adding a restaurant which will presumably be generating wastewater and sewage as well, did not create an excessive demand on the finite sewage capacity in Portsmouth?
Given the surrounding development area, the size of the sewer pipes that we have for information within the Route 1 bypass, we were anticipating that there's enough capacity for the pipes to access into the system. Obviously, that's going to have to be reviewed through the Technical Advisory Review Committee process, and if any upgrades are needed as a result of the project, we would have to provide those.
I'm not talking about simply getting the wastewater into the sewage system. I'm talking about how much of the sewage capacity, treatment capacity, will you be utilizing, and how did you determine what is your case for stating that is not excessive demand when you're moving from 59 hotel units to 124 and adding a restaurant?
I don't have the flow data off the top of my head, but I guess given you're talking about downstream all the way at the treatment plant?
Indeed.
So given the recent upgrades to the treatment plant, we are anticipating that can handle this capacity. Again, if we are required to provide any sort of upgrades as part of the technical advisory review process, this is also going to need to be reviewed by city engineers, signed off, and go through an NHDES sewer connection process. So if they deem that it's not appropriate, or if the demand's too excessive, then we would, again, be.
So right now, there's no quantitative analysis of any kind that would
We
indicate
typically would
how
not
much
look that
capacity is
far
available
down,
and-
we wouldn't look that far downstream at a plant. There's too much that would happen between this site and getting it out there. There's pump stations, there's pipes. That's a very large undertaking. We would analyze it from leaving this site and getting into the sewer pipe and relying on the DPW staff, working with them to ensure that there is adequate capacity for the plant to handle this.
Thank you. On page, let's see, I'm not sure if your pages are numbered, but on our page 38, there's a paragraph that begins, "In this case, there is no benefit to the public in denying the variances that is not outweighed by the hardship upon the owner." Do you know where I'm referring to right now?
Generally, yes.
Further, it goes on to state, "The project was designed to site the building and structures as far from Hodgson's Brook as possible." Is what you mean to say that as possible for a building of this size? Because surely a smaller building could be placed closer to Coakley and farther away from Hodgins.
Yes, obviously, of course, but this program, with this level of amenities and this level of improvements, dictated this project. This project is I can sense the concern. I think I know you all well enough that I would like to just say that this is a first step in a very long set of approvals, whether it be at the state level, whether it be through the technical advisory committee, whether it be through the planning board. To your question, Ms. Margison, into the traffic, the ordinance states there has to be a substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion. We're not there yet because we're only at the special exception stage. Assuming, if we could get over this hump, then the real work begins. We're a long way from approval, but we don't get there unless we can get through the special exception process. But there are many levels of review and many levels of approval before this project gets built. And all of the concerns that you all have raised will be addressed in great detail at some point.
I'm sorry, yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Mattson.
Referring to the elevation plans, I see some numbers that are over 60 feet and some that are under 60 feet. And I know that 60 feet is the height limit here, and I know you're not seeking a variance for that, but if you could just clarify how our ordinance's height definition applied and what the actual height is, because it just says that on your application that it's under 60 feet, but it doesn't say what the height is.
We think it's the height of the parapet that is that maximum height of the, I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, there's a few that are over 60 feet. The height of the parapet is the tallest. I guess I was just wondering what the actual height, as defined by ordinance, was.
We're certainly willing to revise the design if there's an issue on height, but the intent of this project is to meet what's required under the ordinance.
Okay.
Are you done, Mr. Mattson? All done? Okay, yes, Ms. Gefford.
Hi, I just have a question about the elevation, not of the building, but actually the topography, because you're right, from Route 1, you can't, there's right now a retaining wall, and the property slopes down to the brook. So are you proposing that everything will be level in terms of the new property and the asphalt? Like what, it's a little hard to tell from your plan.
No, the site's still going to slope generally in the same manner that it does now. So that I think, like, with respect to the drive-through queuing itself in the rear, that'll be set down from where the height of Coakley Road would be, similar to the Route 1 bypass.
So just to describe it, you'd come in off Coakley Road, you'd actually go downhill to Order?
You'd go down, and then you're going to come.
And that's how you get into the underground parking as well? And then as you're coming up to get your order, you're getting back to level?
That's correct, yes.
Thanks.
Are there any further questions for the applicant? Okay, if not, then the public hearing is closed. Oh,
No.
public, sorry. I was just about to ask if there were any comments. Got the better of me. Okay, we're open. Is there anyone to speak to, for, or against this petition? Anyone to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone to speak in opposition to this petition?
Good evening, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair. Congratulations on your reelection.
Thank you.
Jim Lee, 520 Sagamore Avenue. I'd like to speak in opposition to this application, both the special exception and the variance. If you may recall, not too many years ago, we turned down an application for a Krispy Kreme donut shop right across the street. The Starbucks is basically the same horse pulling a different buggy in the same place. So if you can't have donuts on one side, you certainly can't have muffins on the other side. Some changes that have occurred in this already crowded area in the very recent past. You know, Liberty Mutual has reactivated their facility on Borthwick Avenue and closed the one in Dover, so they're bringing more traffic in there. The hospital has just completed a big addition and a several hundred parking lot on Borthwick Avenue, which cannot help but increase the traffic on Borthwick Avenue and that intersection. Also across the street is a very active senior center with seniors coming and going all during the day. And if you've been there sometimes in the summer, I've seen traffic backed up on Route 1 almost back to Portsmouth Toyota. So having a triple-size motel plus a Starbucks there can only exacerbate the traffic problems that already exist. And I think the reason this fails on several of the variances is, one is granting the request will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance and contrary to public interest. This project substantially alters the characteristics of the neighborhood and could threaten the health, safety, and welfare of the public by the increase in traffic. And the substantial justice is done by granting the application. I think the hardship here is on the public having to deal with the increased traffic that would come from the Starbucks and the motel. And then to the special exception, so there will be no creation of a traffic safety hazard or a substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion. There's already a substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity. Adding the Starbucks and 100 and whatever number is on the motel can only exacerbate that traffic problem we have now. So for those reasons, I would ask that you not grant the special exception or the variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak in opposition?
Good evening, everyone. Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. And I come down because I have been trying to watch for buffer zones that are being affected, which affects all of us in our city given the current climate. And I ask here, I guess I'm a little baffled. It sounds like there's a lot of stuff that has to go through on this project with the state. I would think that would happen first before it even comes to the city. But so I'm a little perplexed. It seems like there's a lot of what ifs out there. But I am worried the fact that We have a master plan that says we cannot build in our buffer zone. I do commend the company for removing some of it, but they're still within the buffer zone. Along with the wastewater treatment, it is a low point. So I guess my question would be, would there be a need for extra pumps there to pump out where there's not something on the other side of it? So I think there's a lot of logistics. I'm not sure what the good is for the city or for the people in our community. And I'm not quite sure what the hardship is for the company. They bought it knowing all of this. So I guess I'm a little perplexed by that part of your rules. So I would hope that we honor our master plan and really think about our environmental buffer zones and how that all works, especially with the roundabout they're proposing. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Anyone to speak to, for, or against? To, for, or against? Okay, now, the public hearing is closed. Okay.
Can I make a request?
Of course.
I apologize to the board. I normally put this in my memo, but I would like to suggest if the board were to approve this application, that they add a stipulation noting that the design of the structure may change as a result of site plan review by TAC and Planning Board.
Okay, thank you. Okay. What would you like to do?
I'll just start. Regarding the special exception, I guess I would start by saying that I have no problem with allowing a hotel here, and I think the hotel that's currently there has worked fine. So I guess if we were taking it separately from the variances, if we are approving a hotel, is it this hotel specifically, or are we approving a hotel, and then we can move on to the variances
It's this hotel.
specifically? Okay.
Is it not?
Well,
Well, otherwise,
It
there
would
wouldn't
be-
have to be anything attached to it.
It would be this design as proposed. I mean, the name can change,
Right.
but this layout, this proposal
If it
would
were
be it.
loose floating, we could just approve a special exception without any plan, basically. I mean, it's got to be.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering if that got approved and then the future plans were changed that didn't require variances, they wouldn't need the special exception anymore, but I guess we should just consider it as this application, so. Okay,
Yes, yeah, that's the note I've been getting from the department.
gotcha.
Ms. Marchison?
Yeah, I do think that I think we actually have to separate them when we vote on them, special exception and
Yes.
variance. So, that's.
Is that what you were asking?
No, that part I agree with, and
okay.
because of that, I was wondering if because they're separate, if we could just approve a hotel there, or if it's also this hotel with the variances required. But I think we'll treat it as presented. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'd like to make a comment, and that is that hearing the responses to the various questions about the special exception, I do not find that the applicant has provided adequate evidence that the criteria for the special exception for this project have been satisfied. So I would not be in favor.
Okay. You look- Ms. Marchison?
This is a tough application. It's just taking it as a whole, presented and advertised. I don't think we have ever rejected a special exception because if the applicant can meet all the criteria, there's actually kind of a prerogative that we actually have to approve it. But I believe that the congestion in the vicinity, traffic safety hazards have really not been demonstrated by the applicant. And I will say that I think most of that is driven by the Starbucks, not perhaps by the hotel, but by the Starbucks. But I have to take, the two of them together. And I don't believe that it has met the criteria.
Mr. Van.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with regards to the special exception, I mean, I think ultimately we would be approving a hotel use. Our ordinance talks to sizes. We actually didn't make a distinction in how this was advertised. We only made it 10.40, which is the overall category. There are 4 distinctions up to 125 rooms. Conveniently, this is 124 rooms. 126 to 250, 251 to 500, more than 500. It is kind of immaterial in general business. All of those require a special exception. To me, I do think there is a separation from the variances in the sense that it really comes down to a 124-room hotel of some sort placed somewhere on this property. Do we think it meets the special exception criteria? And I think that is separate from some of the variances that are being asked for. And I think we need to be careful that we don't go and throw non-hotel related concerns into our special exception for the hotel. That said, I mean, I do think the traffic is kind of a consideration. We are more than doubling the size of the number of vehicles going back and forth through here. There are future traffic changes and patterns to the whole thing. Whole area. I don't necessarily think that the residential portion of Coakley Road would be negatively impacted, but other than being able to get to and from their residences, right? So using some of those same roads, that's the only way in and out of their neighborhood. I don't see like lots of vehicles necessarily wandering up into their neighborhood, although there could be people that get confused, but I would say that's a relatively minor concern. So I think that's the one portion of the criteria that maybe just the size of the hotel gives me some pause for the special exception. Otherwise, that, I mean, special exceptions in general are pretty low threshold to meet in terms of stormwater, sewer, increase in sewer use. From a big picture standpoint for the whole entire city, I don't see where this is necessarily impactful. It could be if there was some discussion that, hey, we're already maxed out in all of the capability in this neighborhood to handle the sewage, then maybe that would be, something where that criteria would come into effect. But to me, the one that we would need to hang our hat on if we deny the special exception would be the traffic one. And again, I think we need to be cautious about that. It's a pretty low bar. With regards to the variances, this is where I have all my heartache with this project. The applicant has tried to make the argument that, it's a hardship that we're on a relatively small lot with a brook going through it. Okay, but at some point, hardship turns into overdevelopment, right? So we're saying, hey, I only have this little small property, so my impression of what's happening here is we're sticking what we want in the most cookie cutter way that we typically go and do it on any other property, and we're going to stick it on this small lot, and we're going to ask for a lot of relief. And I do think that the amount of relief that's being asked for, 1 foot where 40 feet is required, 1 foot where 30 feet is required, 1 foot where 10 feet is required, and sort of, it's not just like a little tiny corner of the property. I mean, we're talking about a 1 foot setback from almost the entire property line along Coakley Road. To me, that is where I have, I just think that the variances are too much. I think that, okay, we have spirit of the ordinance, which I know we kind of talk about the characteristics of the neighborhood, but really in my mind here, the spirit of the ordinance is we are trying to do new and different things in these areas to try and change from the same old look of parking in front and building to the back to something different. And that's a goal coming out of our master plan and coming out of how our zoning is set up. And to just go and say, well, it doesn't, we need the circulation for our Starbucks, and so therefore we want relief from that. I don't think there's the hardship idea that this is too small of a lot is actually not a hardship in this case. It's really just telling us that, no kidding, you're asking for too much to place on it. So with that, I think the special exception could approve. I think that the variances in my mind are not approvable.
I just want to say one thing. One of the options that we have is to postpone and ask the petitioner to go to TAC before coming to us again. And that might,
Sorry,
Sorry,
it's
yeah.
if you asked the petitioner to go to TAC, it would be with specific questions.
right.
So if there are concerns regarding, say, traffic flow or, concerns about how it's going to impact the sewer system, you can send those concerns and questions to TAC, and ask for information from the Public Works Department to make a recommendation specifically on those concerns.
I think that would be an appropriate thing to do if we, for example, had questions on the special exception of the type that you're talking about, but that we were, in this meeting, approving the variances pending the special exception. Otherwise, we are potentially sending the petitioner on an errand that will only bring them back here to find that they are not getting approval for the variances, and I don't think that's fair.
Ms. Marchison.
I'm going to say I'm not in favor of that. With all due respect, I appreciate the sentiment stuff, but the applicant has been in front of TAC. This is the application that they have presented to us, and my concerns are not necessarily TAC related. They're really the same as Mr. Rayum's. I think there's no hardship. And so is a very sophisticated applicant. I'm not against your project. I think it's very nice, very well thought out, but they've made a decision to come to this board, even though they have been in front of TAC. So I think that we need to vote it up or down.
Mr. Ram.
Yeah, just, I guess one more clarification from staff is if we were to deny the special exception, obviously now Fisher v. Dover implications, would that say that we could not authorize any hotel in that space? Or, again, if they came back, we would be demanding that it be a completely different size at that point in time? Is that our impression?
It would have to be a substantially different proposal.
Right.
I can't make a determination on size specifically, but it would be up to the board, again, with that Fisher versus Dover consideration.
Right.
Even if we postpone it and don't vote on it one way or another.
I'm sorry?
I'm not even going to go there because there's no interest in doing the postponement, so.
I don't know.
Certainly willing
I don't know about,
This is, I'm sorry, the public hearing is.
Yes, over.
Just regarding the special exception, and not looking at the variance for now, for traffic, I actually think it is a improvement to remove those curb cuts along Route 1 bypass. Those have always concerned me a little bit, or any on and off of the bypass with its higher rate of speed. And so I don't know if that creates, I would say it's actually an improvement in terms of a traffic safety hazard, although the second part of number 4 for the special exception is a substantial increase in the level of traffic. Obviously, there will be an increase in the level of traffic, and whether it's not substantial, I think is debatable. And then regarding the excessive, again, number 5 is no excessive demand, including sewer. Obviously, there will be an increased demand, but whether or not it's excessive, I think is more debatable. I still think, I think Mr. Ayum kind of expressed what I was getting at in terms of the special exception is separate from this plan's variance requests. So I guess I'm not sure if we can just vote on the special exception first, or if we should be. And we still have to vote on them separately.
It
but
is very unusual for us to have something.
yeah.
I guess, again, just trying to understand what our options are. Could the board table the special exception and just vote on the variances? And then we can see, my fear with the special exception, if we turn it down, puts this in the situation of a Fisher v. Dover decision down the road, And I'm not entirely sure that's fair to the applicant where some of our concerns are still somewhat speculative at this point in time. Or can we deny without prejudice, something along those lines? What our options might be.
I'm looking for you. Well,
So just a reminder, the proposal before the board is a full project. Parsing it out may make things more difficult, because if part of it is denied, then, and part of it is approved, then you are not approving that whole project together anymore. Where this discussion comes in, you may want to consider reopening the public hearing and asking more questions of the applicant. If that were to happen, if, how would this affect your project? That is an option for you to do, to reopen the public hearing and talk to the applicant. But again, this is a full proposal that requires a special exception and 5 variances.
I understand that. I guess we can approve 3 variances and deny 2 variances. We have that option of doing that. We can approve a special exception and deny 5 variances. We can deny 1 variance. Ultimately, I agree that they will negatively impact the ability of the applicant to go and complete their project, but they would give them direction on where they need to head, I guess, is my thought.
what would you like to do? Would you like to consider the variances, each one separately? Would you like to do it gestalt?
I'm a Gestalt guy.
Gestalt guy.
But I don't know if that works here. I'll start the ball rolling.
Okay.
Can I just want to
Yes.
make clear what we're doing. So,
Okay.
we're going to deal with the special exception and variance separately, but with the understanding that this is one project. Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'm prepared to make a motion to deny the special exception.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Rossi, go ahead.
In considering the 5 criteria for approval of a special exception, we find that now I can't get the thing to open. Hold on, give me 1 second. Thank you. We find that the proposal falls short on 2 important aspects of satisfying these criteria. 10.233.24, no creation of a traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity. That the proposal as it stands will necessarily increase traffic congestion in an already congested area, and therefore does not satisfy the requirement of 10.233.24. And with regard to 10.233.25, no excessive demand on municipal services, there has not been an adequate analysis presented to demonstrate that there will not be an excessive demand placed on the finite capacity of our waste water treatment facilities based on the increased number of rooms and the addition of a restaurant to this site. That is my motion.
Well, I have a problem. The second, I agree with number 4 in that the numbers presented by the applicant after I asked him indicate that there is a substantial, to my view, a substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity. I do not agree with number 5, however. It is true that hotels are big users of water and sewer because they're 24/7 operations. When I think of no excessive demand on municipal services, including but not limited to water, I think of something like, I don't know, Lonza, when they're manufacturing, all the stuff that they do, they use a huge amount of water. So I don't find that number 5, it violates number 5. So
I would be willing to modify my motion to eliminate number 5.
that's fine with me.
Accept that? Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to deny the special exception.
Can I just make a comment?
Yes?
Informing my decision on this is that even though there'll be an increase in level of traffic, the engineer for the project stated that the level of service would still be adequate. So I think that I don't necessarily think that would be definitely not a creation of a traffic safety hazard, or and whether or not the increase is substantial is not
Okay.
clear.
Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will not be supporting the motion. I do think there's some concerns about the traffic. I'm not convinced that it can't be addressed to our satisfaction for a hotel of the same size as what's being requested here. And I just think we're making some generalized conclusions about what we think would happen. And I just think we need more technical information to allow us to, in good conscience, deny the special exception based off of traffic impacts. I just don't think we know at this point in time well enough the special exception bar is pretty low. And I just fear that we're trying to make some conclusions without all the relevant facts. Over.
Ms. Gefford.
Just real quick, on the traffic, it seems that the bigger concern is the Starbucks and that traffic load and not necessarily the hotel. And I have two questions. One is the combination of a hotel and a restaurant doesn't appear to be contemplated. A restaurant is permitted in GB. So I just don't know that the zoning ordinance is adequate to address the combo meal that we're getting here.
Okay.
Well, I would just want to
I'm
add.
sorry, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I did base my second of Mr. Rossi's motion on information presented by the applicant as to trip generation, which apparently they have been doing in front of the planning board.
Okay. So,
Okay.
Call the question.
yeah, the motion is to deny the special exception. And so a yes vote denies the special exception. Okay, we'll start with Ms. Gefford.
A no denies the motion?
A yes denies the special
A no.
exception.
I vote no.
Okay.
Yes.
Ms. Murchison. Mr. Rayam.
No.
Mr. Ross.
Yes.
Mr. Matz.
No.
And I vote no as well. So
We need an affirmative
we
motion.
need an affirmative motion now. Is there someone who would like to approve the special exception for this?
Madam Chair, I'm not ready to approve it, but I would make a motion to, and I know this has got some concern, but to table consideration of the special exception with the request to the applicant to provide more detailed information back to this board on trip generation, impacts to future changes, to the potentially to the highway entrances, exits, traffic signalization, and also with some emphasis on the potential, what would be the impacts to the neighborhood, in the sense that this is only going to be one of, currently the only inlet outlet to that neighborhood, but in the future one of two. And it would be limited to the special exceptions for the hotel, so it would be limited to the proposed hotel at the size that they are proposing.
Did you make that in the form of a motion?
Yes, I did.
Okay, is there a second?
Well, are we allowed to do that under our rules?
Can I just ask a
Yes.
clarifying question? When you say table, are you intending a continuance to a time certain,
Sure. Continuance to a time certain.
which is?
Next month,
Okay.
our next monthly meeting.
Is there a second? I should have asked before you.
I'll second that.
Okay. All right, is there discussion about this? This would table it, asking for more information for a month from now, at which point we hopefully will feel better on a definitive decision.
Well, we actually had an issue about this with an application on, I think, Maplewood, and whether or not we are allowed to do that under our rules, that we're supposed to consider and act upon the application immediately following the public hearing.
If I may, Madam Chair, so the guide, our guidebook that we have, I mean, it talks about our ability to take additional time as necessary to get the information that the board needs to make the proper decision. That could include that we aren't prepared to make a motion at some point in time and we want additional time. And it even talks in there about going back and having one or more board members go back and formulate a motion to bring back to the board in future meetings. I know we don't take advantage of it very often in this forum, but it certainly is, and I think needs to be, something that we are able to take advantage of. And I'm not familiar with anything in our rules. We have used that in the past when the board still has enough questions. I understand that the applicant, this is their best shot to address it to the board, but at the same point in time, I think in fairness, there's just enough uncertainty in my mind that I would want more detailed information to make a determination on a special exception that, again, would place the applicant in a Fisher v. Dover position should we deny it. That's all.
Ms. Marchison,
Do
you believe that it is?
I don't know. We did this for Kent Street. We postponed or continued our deliberations. We had additional questions for the application. And now I don't know whether or not we could do that.
We did. We did it.
Yeah.
We did it.
We've done
And we came back and had answers and drawings and,
it. Right.
yeah.
I mean, there's always concern. We're not the HDC. We don't want, work session after work session after work session.
In this case, we are,
But at the same point in time, we do want to make sure that we have all the necessary facts to the comfort level of the board members, is my
And
thought.
I would say that's the responsibility of the applicant. So, I mean, I only when I asked about the trip generation reports, did we get that information? We'd only got parking information before then. So, I mean, I do have, special exception is allowed in this area. There's a hotel now. If we do deny it, I hope that they can bring it in front of us again. I think this is a very unique application. I'm not sure Fisher v. Dover would apply to a successive application. So I mean, those are just my thoughts.
okay, there's a motion on the floor to table,
Actually, continue to a.
continues to a time certain
To time
next
certain,
month.
which is our next monthly meeting.
And
There was a second.
there was a second, yes. So if there is no further discussion, we will vote on the continuance. Ms. Geffron?
Can somebody restate the motion exactly?
Oh, yes, please. The motion is to continue it to a time certain so we can get better answers about traffic and all of the things that would go with it, trips and cuts and how it would affect the neighborhood and basically the traffic issue.
This is just for the special exception.
Just for the special exception.
I did have one question about that, and it's a question for you. May I? Okay. So is it traffic generated by the hotel and the 123 keys?
124.
Is it 4 or 3? Whatever. I know it's at that limit of the bottom, right. Or are we looking for the combination of traffic? And I did read the planning board study session, and traffic and queuing at the light was raised as a question. That information wasn't presented to us today, just saying, but I'm just trying to make sure we're focused.
I
Or
have assumed that we're not separating the hotel and it's all of the traffic coming from that location.
Right, but we don't need a special exception for the restaurant.
Yeah. Which is the conundrum that we're in.
Okay, Steph. Well,
My motion is related
But
to
the
the
traffic-
special exception, which is related to the hotel. That is what my motion is. I'm presuming Mr. Mattson seconding it. That's what he's looking for. It is up to the applicant to try and go and address concerns of the board, and I would say that this next shot is their one shot to go and convince us regarding the special exception.
Is that clear? It's just about clear to everybody? Okay. Ms. Gefford?
Yes to continue.
Ms. Marchison?
No.
Mr. Ram?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
No.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So, there's the yes.
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion on the variances. I would move that we deny all of the 5 variances that are being asked for here. 1, 2, 3, 4,
If there
5. Yes.
is a second, is there a second to,
I'll second.
okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Ram.
Thank you. I think I've expressed pretty clearly my concerns with the project. The applicant, I understand this is what they want. I understand that, from their perspective, they've made an economic argument with regard to the need to have what they are proposing. That said, I think this board, the economics of it is not one of our criteria. It's not one of our factors. What we are concerned with is the criteria that we are provided with, and I think that this is falling down on 2 of them. And so it has to meet all 5 to be able to be granted. I think these requests all fall down, and I think they're interrelated. So I think denying all 5 of them does make sense, because they're all really interrelated to the proposed layout of the property, the fact that it is small and is sort of being forced. We're trying to force a lot of stuff into a small parcel. So with that, I do think granting the variance does not observe the spirit of the ordinance. So we do tie that test to the public interest test as well, and it talks about the characteristics of the neighborhood. But I think there's also another aspect to it with the spirit of the ordinance, where we're talking about what the ordinance is trying to achieve. At some point, we want to try and say new structures on old properties. You're replacing a 1950s hotel with something brand new. This is the kind of look that we want to have for our next generation of whatever it is that we're building in this area. And I just think that what's being asked for here is not in any way trying to go and respect what's coming out of our master plan in terms of positioning of the building and its relationship. I think there's an opportunity here to move the building even farther away from Hodgson Brook, which is one of the things that the applicant has tried to emphasize in their application. I do think, as they've admitted, it's being driven by the presence of the coffee restaurant. We'll give Starbucks yet another free advertising plug. And so with that, I just think we're missing an opportunity here. The spirit of the ordinance is we want something different. We don't just want the same cookie cutter. We don't want the parking between the building and the street, and we certainly don't want it pressed right up against the street. And the property line here, if there was a huge distance between Coakley Road and the property line, I could maybe feel somewhat better about it. But really, there's not a lot of distance there between the edge of the property line and Coakley Road. They're asking for 1 foot where 40 feet is required, not meeting the spirit of the ordinance. And then the hardship, again, the applicant is trying to say, hey, I got a small lot here that is got a brook running through it, which I agree with, but at the same point in time does not correlate to the degree of variance that they're asking for. So while a true statement, I think the variances that they're asking for, it's not tied to that. It's tied to the desire to have everything that they want on the lot. And again, an economic driver, but we look at the unique characteristics of the property, not necessarily what the applicant's economics are. So I think there's some opportunities here to rework this, maybe even some way to keep the coffee shop in there somewhere. and still continue to be, a better application in terms of trying to meet what we're looking for out of our zoning ordinance and our master plan. So with that, I recommend denial.
Does the second have anything to add?
Just briefly, my biggest, I agree with everything that Mr. Williams says. My real concern was that 1 foot between the parking and the front lot line. Especially, I mean, the reason for that is so that there's not so much obstruction for people pulling in and out as they're trying to get onto the road. And you're looking at a place where there would be a substantial amount of ingress and egress traffic, and that's a long line. That concerned me very much. So that's all
Okay.
that's all I have to add.
Is there any further discussion? Ms. Gefford?
I just wanted to say, I think the plan is heading in the right direction, and that if they could, by moving stuff away from the brook, if there's a way to shrink the footprint of the building so that the variances in terms of closeness to the Route 1 bypass and a little bit Coakley Road can be adjusted, that would be something that I would consider as a material improvement.
Okay. So the motion on the floor is to deny the project because it does not meet our criteria.
Deny the 5 variances.
Deny the 5 variances, yes. Okay, are we ready to vote? A yes vote denies the project. Ms. Gefford?
Yes.
Ms. Margerson?
Yes.
Mr. Ram?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Easy peasy.
Okay. Okay, the next item of business is the request of William C. Giles, Revocable Trust owner, for property located at 375 Coolidge Drive for after-the-fact construction and demolition of existing decks, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.521 to allow a 17-foot rear yard where 30 feet is required. And B, building coverage of 22.5%, where 20 is the maximum allowed. And 2, variance from reconstructed or enlarged, variance from section 10.321 to allow a nonconforming structure or building to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 268, Lot 41, and lies within the Single Residence B District. Is there anyone to speak to this? Hi.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. My name is Attorney Colby Gamester, and I'm here this evening on behalf of the William C. Giles Revocable Trust 2011. And with me this evening is the trustee and owner of the property, William Giles, as well as his contractor, Troy Junkus. As noted in our application, the legal notice, the agenda, and as the chairwoman just stated, this application is seeking after-the-fact variance relief for the retention of the rear deck, as well as other items associated with the project. The property is a 12,511 square foot lot in the single residence B zoning district. It consists of an existing ranch, a rear bump out, a 2-car garage addition, a shed, and several decks, which is the reason why we are here this evening. It is currently non-conforming with respect to lot area, the front yard setback, the rear yard setback, building coverage, and compliant in all other respects. And the front yard setback encroachment is a result of a prior owner's addition of the 2-car garage, which came before this board back in 2002. Not long after Mr. Giles purchased this property, he had removed well over a dozen trees of all sizes throughout the yard. This left the front yard and the front of the house looking a little bare-boned. As sort of a knee-jerk reaction, he constructed a roughly 400 square foot front deck, which did not have much character at all. Over the years, Mr. Giles had noticed that he and his family really never used the front deck whatsoever. It was full sun all the time. It lacked privacy in every sense of the word, and he even regularly used his grill and the driveway in front of his garage and not his deck. As the years went on, Mr. Giles thought more and more about a rear deck, and this past spring, he called his contractor, On Course Remodeling, who had done some work at his house and most recently a new roof, and he asked about the deck, and Mr. Junkus spearheaded this, and after a few meetings and conversation, size, dimension, design, cost, things were figured out, and Mr. Giles asked to proceed. Mr. Junkus, lacking specific experience with respect to projects outside of roofs at the time, had a crew available, and the construction of the deck began almost immediately and took only a week to complete. Mr. Giles loved the result of the rear deck so much, he had asked if a side deck could be constructed, at which point it was, or rather it began almost immediately as the crew was still available. During construction of the side deck, the city became aware of the construction, and after a brief investigation, issued a cease and desist for lack of a building permit and possible zoning violations, and all work came to a stop. The fact of the matter is this, it's simple. Had a permit been pulled for the construction of the rear deck, the city inspection staff would easily have flagged the fact that the deck was going to be within the rear setback, and that it was most likely going to have issues with the maximum allowable building coverage. And this is why we are here this evening. Seeing as the rear deck had already been constructed, the most important first step was to get an exact understanding of the dimensional layout and what was occurring on the property, and we enlisted the services of T.F. Moran to survey the property and provide an existing conditions plan. And as we look at the existing conditions plan, we have the old top button for the pointer. All right, that's the first time on this side with the pointer. As we go around the property, we have the existing ranch in the rear bump out. We have the 2002 addition of the two-car garage. We have the utility shed. As we see, this is the previously existing now front deck, which was roughly 400 square feet, and as mentioned, lack of privacy, not really used, and although 400 square feet is a relatively large size surface area, it is generally narrow and so therefore underutilized. And then we've got the completely constructed and still existing rear deck, and also at the time the partially constructed side deck, and we can tell from even from the existing conditions plan back in the summertime, how the two decks in the back and the side do seem to appear more proper and appropriate for the property. They're kind of tucked into the building and within its right angles, but nonetheless, the existing conditions plan at the time is certainly overwhelmed by the existence of decks. Steph, could you move to the proposed next slide? So here's the proposed conditions plan, and what Mr. Giles has proposed was to remove the, oh, that's the wrong one, there we go, was to remove the vast majority of the deck and only leaving a small portion for the landing and the stairway, completely, and then obviously landscaping on either side of where the deck was, and completely removing the partially constructed side deck, and then, of course, the retention of the rear deck. Since the submission of this application in late November, Mr. Junkus and his crew have actually already completely removed the partially constructed side deck, and they also went ahead and completely removed the entirety of the front deck. So this proposed conditions plan is slightly stale, given the timing of events. And I have some pictures for the board if they would like confirmation of the complete removal of both the partially constructed side deck as well as the front deck.
Thanks. I can pass it down. Okay, thanks.
Just want to make sure I'm not taking the wrong one.
As we move on to the next set of slides, it exhibits, Steph, if you wouldn't mind. We have a series of photographs of the house and from different perspectives to and from the house. Here, basically, the front of the house, kind of the bare bone. This is a picture with the front deck still there. Not much character to it whatsoever. Next slide, please. And then from the left, and we can go right to the next one, from the right, and this is just to show that the rear deck as constructed is not visible to the public. And now we start plotting our way around the property to the 5 direct abutters. We have 5 Hoover Drive, which is the direct abutter to the right, and this is from their property line looking into Mr. Giles's property. And as we can see, that rear bump out completely shields the deck as it's been constructed within the limits of the pre-existing rear bump out. Next photo, please. And this is standing on the deck toward and then looking out towards the direct abutter to the left, 315 Coolidge. And we provided in a couple of these exhibits both summer-winter photos, seeing as foliage and vegetation do play an aspect and do play a factor in our application. And so we see here that in the summertime, the house at 315 is not visible at all. However, in the wintertime, there is some visibility once the foliage has died back. And now looking towards and from the abutter to the back left of the property, we see that there is some visibility at this time. And now we're looking at the abutter directly in the rear of Mr. Giles. This is the closest property to the deck. As we can see on the summer photo with a lot of foliage, there's only a mere sliver that's showing from the neighbor's house, and then we have about 2/3 of the window showing once the foliage has died back, but there still is quite a bit of mature vegetation back there. And this is from and to the back property to the right from Mr. Giles's residence, and we can see that there is some visibility there from both angles. And it's, as we can see from these at least 5 different perspectives, it appears the most visibility is from the farthest properties away from the deck. And the next slide is just a photo of the deck itself, showing how Mr. Giles is using it. Obviously, rug, deck furniture, couch, coffee tables. There's the grill in the background. Looks like a taller table bar. This is all type of things that one would use in a deck and that he never used in the front deck. And the next slide is just 2 pictures of the backyard generally, and this is to show both the narrow strip of land between the house and the existing mature vegetation at the property line, as well as the general grade of the property, how it goes, away from the house and towards the property, the shared property line. So what we are left here is with a rear deck that is fully within the rear setback, for which relief is obviously needed, specifically a rear yard of 17 feet, where 17 feet is proposed, 17 feet is existed, and 30 feet is required. We have a variance from the maximum allowable building coverage, where 22.2 proposed percent and 20% is the maximum allowed. And we have to add a little asterisk to that statement now, because once the front deck was completely removed, the original concrete steps and landing were uncovered, and Mr. Giles plans to either reuse these steps, resurface them, or replace something in kind, which will create a step up to the front door. And whatever the structure or whatever the design is going to be, this is going to be under 18 inches, which is not countable for allowable maximum or the building coverage calculation. So we can remove the proposed deck, front deck, that TF Moran had included on the proposed conditions plan, and after conferring with them, that does reduce the overall current building coverage to 21.2%, so we're looking at a 1.2% existing condition over the maximum allowed. And finally, to allow for the enlargement of a lawful non-conforming structure, seeing as a sliver of the house and the rear bump out was previously existing within the rear setback. And at this time, I'll move on to the criteria, unless the board has any questions with the history of the property or the lay of the land.
Criteria.
Take this moment, take a sip of water. So granting the variance will not be contrary to the public interest and will observe the spirit of the ordinance. Here we have the 2-part alternative test of either not altering the essential character of the neighborhood or the threatening of the public health, safety, and welfare. The request this evening, that being the retention of the rear deck, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Decks and rear decks at that are common in residential neighborhoods, including this one. And even if they were uncommon, given the layout of the property, the grade of the backyard, the distance of the abutters to and from the deck and the related sightlines that we saw, as well as the mature vegetation and the rear bump out around shielding the property and visibility further. The rear deck is at worst barely visible. The increase in building coverage is not entirely fresh to the eyes of the public or to the property, and what I mean by that is that the way the rear deck is nestled into those corners and the right angles of the property, it's more like it's infill rather than a new structure jetting out into open space. The removal of the front deck is also a benefit to the essential character of the neighborhood, which the removal is necessitated by wanting to retain the rear deck. And the eventual landscaping which takes place will also be a benefit. The existence of the rear deck, by granting the requested relief this evening, still honors and observes the spirit and intent of the ordinance, since the purpose of the setbacks and the building coverage are to create uniform lots and uniform building envelopes, to prevent overcrowding on lots, and to protect abutters' access to light, air, and space. I believe the pictures that we showed themselves show that the goals of the ordinance are not adversely affected by the existence of the rear deck. Substantial justice will be done by granting the variance. Mr. Giles' loss far outweighs the public's gain should the relief be denied this evening. In this particular instance, we do have the added feature of the fact that Mr. Giles would be forced to deconstruct a well-built and aesthetically pleasing deck in an area of his yard that has otherwise been rendered useless by the grade of his yard, the shade, and the narrowness of the strip of land between the house and the mature vegetation. And we believe, in fact, that the existence of the rear deck will enhance the property and create gains for the public and Mr. Giles by removing the front deck, which was unsightly, and the addition of new landscaping in the front of the house and on the side of the house. So by granting this requested relief, there is a benefit not only to Mr. Giles, but also to the public and the surrounding neighborhood. The values of surrounding properties will not be diminished by granting the variance relief. The existence of the rear deck is, if anything, we believe, a net neutral event to surrounding properties and their values, given the visibility or lack thereof to and from the abutting properties. Much like the substantial justice factor, the existence of the rear deck has only forced the enhanced appearance of other parts of the property and the property overall, which, if anything, will again benefit the neighbors as well as the property. The rear deck has now existed for over 8 months and without comment or concern from any abutters. And these 8 months do include a full summer season where Mr. Giles has and was and will continue, hopefully, to fully enjoy that deck very often. Literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. The special conditions of the property. If we look at the tax map, sorry, Steph. If we look at the tax map in the surrounding area, it can be seen that Mr. Giles' property is actually placed farther back into the lot than most of the surrounding properties, certainly across the street with these deeper lots, but even over on Grant Avenue, you can see the main structures are more towards the middle and in some instances towards the front of the lot. And in relation with the overlay, rather, of today's zoning ordinance, it caused the fact that the rear sliver of the house and the rear bump out is, in fact, within the rear setback. And if we scroll back or just simply think back to the survey, had this house actually been built under today's standards with the 30-foot setback, there is actually a substantial amount of room that the house could be pulled forward so that the deck itself, if the house was sited up here, then there would have been enough room for the 17 feet worth of the deck and the rear bump out, and we wouldn't even be in this situation with the rear setback.
Mr., we're at 15.
Oh, we are at 15. Well, would the board like me to continue with the criteria, or?
Why don't we let him
Yeah,
finish?
just finish quickly,
Quickly.
very quickly.
Very quickly. So certainly, the lot was created in 47 with the Elwin Park development. The house was built in 53. It doesn't predate, obviously, the zoning, the existence of zoning in Portsmouth, that it does predate these standards that are used today in the dimensional requirements. We believe we've shown this evening that the existence of the rear deck and other features, given the specific property, has not overcrowded the property and has not affected the abutters with respect to light, air, and space. And so we are not adversely affecting the very interests the ordinance are seeking to protect. The use is reasonable. It's a residential use. It's a rear deck. These are common. And, you know, finally, prior to the legal notice being mailed, we did mail a letter and the complete packet to the 5 direct abutters around Mr. Giles' property. We have support from 315 Coolidge, from 420 Grant, and from 5 Hoover. With respect to 5 Hoover, Mr. Riley did also state that he hopes the landscaping as proposed will also be part of the improvements Mr. Giles wishes to make, and part of the approval if we gain the support tonight of the board. And we did not hear from 394 or 412 Grant.
Thank you. Are there questions? Mr. Ram?
Me or-
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Ram.
Okay, sorry, I just didn't hear. On the first page of the applicants, this is kind of a question for the applicant's representative and maybe city staff. It's page 54 of our packet, talking about the 2-story addition containing a 2-car garage, and it says it's permitted pursuant to zoning relief. A prior owner received the board adjustment in 2002, but in the staff memo at the beginning, there's no previous history found, so I'm just curious as to where the disconnect is there.
It's true.
Reviewed the property file, Mr. M. It was in the planning file. It was coming from a James Veris existing condition sketch, as well as, or maybe the sketch was from.
I don't want to belabor it too long. It's probably not fully relevant to what we're doing here, but it appears to be some previous relief that you're indicating that they had, and our staff info says they didn't. So I'm just curious.
I would err on the side of what the applicant has provided.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
Is that it? Did you have a question, Mr. Rossi?
Yeah, I'm a little perplexed as to how we got here. Can you remind me again, who was the contractor who built this?
So On-Course Remodeling is the company, and Troy Junkus, who works for On-Course, is here with us this evening.
Is this an experienced contractor?
So primarily, they had been focused on siding and roofing, and this past spring is when they decided to actually expand into decks. When Mr. Giles had reached out to On-Course Remodeling, that is when they asked, or the owner asked Mr. Junkus to spearhead this. Mr. Junkus has mostly his experience with roofing and the roofing industry, and he is prepared to make his apology for his oversight and lapse of judgment this evening.
It's very perplexing when you look at the size of the deck. It's beyond me how anybody could look at that structure and say, no, I don't need a permit. I don't need anybody to come here and inspect the footers and make sure everything's what it should be, particularly somebody who's new to deck building. So how are we to be assured that this deck has been built in compliance with all of the appropriate safety standards? It's high off the ground, and I have some concerns about that.
A building permit is still required. I think it's a proposed condition of the staff memo and the application. So I can have Troy speak more to this, but I believe the inspector has already at one point looked at it, and so as part of the late May or early June, I can't remember exactly when, the inspection department has seen the deck, and a building permit was filed with respect to that, as well as the side deck, which is no longer necessary because it's been completely removed. But there would be other eyes on it, Mr. Rossi, certainly at that point, and certainly for signing off on a final building permit.
I'll take everything at face value. I think this project, I would normally not have any problem with the variance had it been brought to us proactively, as it should have been. I'd like to be convinced that this was not an intentional violation of the requirements to get a building permit. I'll take it at face value that that was not the case, but it's an odd history.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes, so for the side deck that's been removed, off of the rear addition, there's a door that went out onto that deck, and now that deck is no longer there. Will that door have a landing to get down, or will that door be closed off?
So the door is currently permanently locked right now because there's nothing there. Mr. Giles does intend to have landscaping back there. The landscaping at that point is where there used to be a railroad tie retaining wall up against that area with a small landing, so he's got to reconstruct that area to kind of where it was with loam and dirt and whatnot. And I don't know if the exact plan is going to be to remove the door, turn it into a window, but whatnot. But as of right now, it's not accessible, and if it were to be accessible, it's going to be done by raising the slope and grading everything out naturally like it was.
Okay, so it wouldn't affect the building coverage at all?
We don't believe so, because even if we were to naturally raise that soil back up to where it was, I don't think there was an issue previously with that being over 18 inches and whatnot. However, if it had to be, then we would either have to entertain another variance for something over 18 inches that would impact allowable building coverage, or he'd have to make different considerations with what to do with that space.
Okay.
That door.
Any other questions? Ms. Marchison?
So I just, following up with what Mr. Mattson says, I think it's on page 66 of our application, of our packet, that shows the door.
Yes.
That's a significant raising of the grade, from what I can see.
So, does the I gave you all the pictures. Let me just, there used to be a railroad tie, there used to be grade there before it was deconstructed to create, if we look at the picture.
I do see what appears to be some railroad ties there.
Yeah, they're splayed out there. Let me just get to you, Ms. Margison, on the same page here. Let me just check with my client real quick, Ms. Margison. Is that the picture?
These are the extra photos if you'd like them.
What they're going to do with this is not before us.
It's because it would affect the building coverage.
If.
Well, you can't have a door without a landing, and
Yes,
that landing would be
but
over 18
this
inches.
suggestion now would not necessarily.
If they filled it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I apologize. So as we're looking at that picture, Ms. Margison, Mr. Giles said that basically there was a typical landing that actually exited, towards that bay window that you're looking at with supports that did raise it from, straight down. So if we're looking at that door, he's going to have to make a decision when it comes to the next step of the process. If he wants that door to be operable, we could be back here again. If not, he'll have to make different considerations with that door.
Okay. And just I share Mr. Rossi's concerns about a building permit not being pulled. I frankly don't understand that, especially given the size of the deck. And just a question, the site plan, the survey that you sent us, it seems that was just a review. It didn't have a stamp on it. So
I did
assume
notice that there was for review both on the existing conditions plan as well as the proposed conditions plan. I don't, that was for review when it was sent to us, and after several back and forths with TF Moran, getting clarifications, adding information to the plans, it carried over. I certainly, could have TF Moran send to the planning department a stamped survey, but this, I could make the representation that this is the plan from which we've been working since late August. This is the same plan that I met with city staff on to brainstorm what all the zoning relief was requested, as well as other mitigating factors we could do on the property.
And so the stamped version will be exactly, it will be identical to this one.
The existing conditions plan should be exact, and frankly, if we were to provide an updated proposed conditions plan, it would be different because we have in fact removed
out
the
the-
entirety of the deck and whatnot in the front.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone to speak in favor? Is there anyone to speak in opposition to this petition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against? Okay.
Can I just ask the one clarifying
Of course.
question? Attorney Gamester? One quick question. I just want to confirm that the advertised building coverage of 22.5% that was requested, you're telling me now that it's 21.2?
The actual conditions of the property right now are 21.2 per TF Marin's calculation.
Okay, so that will be the final building coverage calculation.
That would be yes, nothing else were to change in the property or will change the property. That's the final building coverage. That's what we're looking for this evening.
Okay, so I would just make a recommendation to the board to acknowledge that it's 21, and we'll round it up to 21.5% rather than the 22.5% that was advertised. Thank you.
Public hearing is closed. What would you like to do?
I remain a little uneasy with regard to Mr. Rayum's question and the answer, which I didn't really fully comprehend, as to whether or not there was a action by the board previously to accommodate the two-story garage. There's something odd going on here. So any action that we take tonight, I would say, should be predicated on follow-up from planning staff to confirm that there was indeed an action taken and that the two-story garage is in compliance with whatever was granted.
Okay. What would you like to do with this current request?
Yeah, I'll just comment that the actual application I have no problem with, but under the circumstances, it is unfortunate that it's an after-the-fact request. But yeah, the actual project seems quite reasonable.
I've always been of the opinion that I try to look at it as the way I would have the first time. And in this case, if there were anything underhanded, it really didn't pay off. So, I mean, this has been nothing but tear down and rethink. And so, for myself, I'm going to look at it anew. But is there a motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, and I'm supportive of the application. I mean, I think, as you point out, if this was if this had not been constructed, the applicant came before us. I mean, I do think that the request for relief is reasonable with the sense that it is trying to match up to an already existing encroachment into the back lot line distance. So it's the same. They're not asking for any more than what is currently there. It is, the conditions of the property are such that I think, it's not going to be seen. I guess my one remaining concern, and I mean, the applicant is more than welcome to bring whatever they want before us, but to me, if there was an issue with a desire to create yet another landing to be able to use the side entry door, that would have been something that should have been presented tonight and not something for future consideration. So, I guess if the applicant wants to bring something like that forward, so be it. But to me, it should have been captured tonight. But otherwise than that, I think what's being asked for is reasonable. I mean, the slope of the property makes it impossible to create a less than 18-inch patio back there to provide, the desired entertaining area. I mean, it's going to have to be a deck. So, my thoughts.
Would you like to make a motion?
like to.
Would
Like
you
to
be-
is
would
quite the
you-
word. However, Madam Chair, I will convert that into a motion to approve the requested relief
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
as presented and advertised. All right. So going through our criteria, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. We're going to let those two together, as the applicant's representative has indicated. Back decks are pretty common. There's really no public interest here that would be of concern. It's going to be hidden from the road. The relief that's being requested is the same as what is an already existing protrusion off of the back of the house that goes into the rear yard setback. So they're not asking for anything more than that. They're which is more reasonable than trying to create a much larger deck that expands further back. So I think in that sense, that they are meeting those two criteria. Granting the variance would do substantial justice, again, from the perspective of neighboring properties, from the perspective of anyone going by on Coolidge Drive, there's really no general purposes of the public interest that would outweigh the applicant's ability to create this deck, which is really their only realistic option for creating outdoor space on the backside of their property due to the slope conditions that they have on it. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Again, relatively modest single deck. The applicant was trying to add on a whole bunch of other additional outdoor spaces. They have come to understand that is not satisfactory, and with total coverage, what the applicant is asking for here is relatively small in terms of roughly 1 to 2% above what is the requirement in terms of coverage. So there's nothing here that would negatively affect neighboring property values. And then the hardship, so the current existing house that's been there for quite some time is pushed all the way back to the 30-foot setback line. Any type of attempt to use the backyard for, recreational enjoyment purposes with some kind of outdoor space is going to naturally require some kind of relief from this board. The degree of relief is, and then there's the sloping condition of the property, which says it needs to be a deck. There is, the nature of the surrounding properties also makes the request not excessive in terms of its impact on what we're really trying to accomplish in the ordinance. So with that, I do think they meet the hardship criteria as well. It's a reasonable use to add on an outdoor living space on the backside of an existing property. With that, I recommend approval.
Does the second have anything to add?
I would like to add, if we can, that the approval is predicated on planning staff following up and confirming that the two-story garage has the proper history to it with regard to Board of Adjustment actions in 2002.
Do you accept that?
I accept that stipulation.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this motion?
We just have to make that stipulation as to 21.5, right?
I'm sorry, I could not hear you.
Instead of 22 coverage, it's actually
Right,
21.
right,
Oh,
right, yes. And further stipulated that it's, sorry, do you want to do it? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure that 22 versus 21 and a half is that big of a deal. I'm fine with, as advertised, for the 22% myself. I guess if there's heartache on the rest of the board, we can talk about it, but to me, that's essentially what we're
Is
authorizing.
there heartache? No, okay. Then we're good to go on this motion. Is there any discussion? Okay, a yes vote allows the deck. Ms. Gefford?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay.
We take a break.
And we're going to take a 10-minute break. A fast 10-minute break. Okay. Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting for January 23rd, 2024 is back in session. And the next item of business is 33 Jewel Court. The request of Jewel Court Properties LLC owner for property located at 33 Jewel Court, Unit S1, whereas relief is needed to establish an event venue serving up to 250 people, which requires a special exception from Section 10.440, use number 9.42, where it is permitted by special exception. Said property is located on Assessor Map 155, Lot 5-S1, and lies within the Character District 4-W, CD 4-W, and the Historic District, LU-23-205. Hello.
Hello. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Attorney John Boson. I represent the applicant. With me tonight is Jessica Kaiser. Jessica is the owner of 33 Jewel Court Properties, and she's proposing to repurpose the vacant second floor office space into an event center. In looking at the board packet online, I noticed that you didn't have the approval letter from the condominium association. I did submit it, but I didn't see it. Is that in your packet? If not, I do have copies, and I thought it was important.
No. Thanks. No, we'll pass it. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
So the second floor of this building is 6,041 square feet. It's the former home of Hawthorne Creative, which is Ms. Kaiser's business. It specializes in the wedding industry. They're a marketing company for the wedding industry, and at one time they housed 45 employees in this space on a daily basis. However, since COVID, in order to retain its employees, Hawthorne adopted a work-from-home model, leaving the second floor vacant for some time. As I'm sure that this board has heard before, there's just no demand for office space, but the city is in need of event space, and there's very little wedding and function space, and we believe that this space is a perfect fit to fill that void. Property sits in the CD4 W zone, where functions for up to 250 people are allowed by special exception. We believe that this proposal meets the criteria for a special exception set forth in the ordinance. First, the proposed use, the function room, is permitted within the district by special exception. Second, the proposed use will pose no hazard to the public or adjacent properties on account of potential fire, explosion, or release of toxic materials. In fact, no explosive or toxic materials or unusual accelerants will be stored on site. Third, there will be no detriment to the property values in the vicinity or change in the essential characteristics of any area, including residential neighborhoods or businesses and industrial districts, on account of the location or scale of buildings and other structures, parking areas, access ways, odor, smoke, gas, dust, or other pollutants, noise, glare, heat, vibration, or unsightly outdoor storage of materials or vehicles. This location is a fully developed site. It's been used for many years as an office space with a daily parking demand. The building is part of a condominium complex that has 205 parking spaces, and you have the letter from the president of the association in support of the proposal. If this special exception is granted, the applicant will appear before the planning board for a parking conditional use permit. Also, there's no outdoor storage of product or equipment on the site. The proposed use does not produce any odor, smoke, gas, dust, noise, glare, heat, or vibration. This building has 4 layers of brick masonry walls that are 13.5 inches thick. In fact, the front of the building facing CVS is 17.5 inches thick. So noise penetration, even at high levels, is barely audible to the outside. The applicant also hired a sound engineer, and his report is in your packet, and he concludes that the proposed function space will not generate noise levels in excess of what the ordinance provides. So as a result, there won't be any detriment to the property values or any change in the essential characteristics of the neighborhood. Fourth, there'll be no creation of a traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity. There's going to be more on this, but we anticipate that the functions held at this property will only be on weekends. Also, to reduce the parking demand on site, the applicant intends to utilize the parking spaces in front of the building. I believe there's 29 parking spaces on site. But the applicant plans to hire valet services and provide a shuttle service to guests to and from the event. And Ms. Kaiser is going to come up and speak to you a little bit more about that. Fifth, there'll be no excessive demand on municipal services, including but not limited to water, sewer, waste, disposal, police and fire protection, or schools. Again, I want to emphasize the word excessive demand. In fact, none of these services are implicated beyond what's already allowed on the property. Finally, the project will result in no significant increase in stormwater runoff onto adjacent properties, and again, we're dealing with an as-built building. No exterior changes are contemplated at all. So at this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Kaiser to come up and introduce herself and talk to you a little bit about the wedding industry, in which she has a lot of experience in.
Hi there, my name is Jessica Kaiser and I'm the property owner at 33 Jewel Court. The second floor of this building, which I'm looking to convert into a wedding and event venue, used to house my marketing agency, Hawthorne Creative, which I founded in 2001. For over 2 decades, my agency has provided consulting and marketing services for more than 250 hotels, destinations, and wedding venues in the U.S., helping them increase destination travel, book more hotel rooms, and host more weddings and events. Some of our local clients include Ocean Properties, all of their luxury hotels, including the Wentworth Hotel, and the Sheraton Portsmouth, the LaBelle Winery in Bedford, the New Hampshire Lakes Region CVB, the Boston Museum of Fine Art, and many more. As a result of my 2 decades of experience, I consider myself an expert in the wedding and event industry. While my agency continues to thrive in the hospitality sector, we followed the COVID trend and moved into a remote working environment in 2020 and began hiring employees in locations all over the country. So like many commercial property owners, I'm looking to creatively reposition my property so that it can continue to thrive and provide value to our community. I feel that the addition of a wedding and event venue would be a benefit to the West End and the community as a whole. I anticipate that this event venue would host somewhere between 25 and 35 events per year, and I expect that the average event would host somewhere around 160 guests. So while I'm seeking an exception for up to 250 guests, which is the normal exception to be seeking, I don't expect that most events will hit maximum capacity. Here are some reasons why I think this event venue could thrive. First, the Seacoast lacks a large enough mix of event spaces to accommodate demand. Many event planners and local caterers have told me that they send inquiries to Bedford, Nashua, and Manchester because most larger venues here on the Seacoast are booked for weekend events several years out. Additionally, to my knowledge, there is not a single preserved historic venue in the area available to host large events. While our town just celebrated its 400th birthday, there are no preserved historic event venues in which our community can actually celebrate. My building was built in 1850 as part of the Frank Jones Brewery. It maintains the original slate roof, the massive original beams that line the entire ceiling, the original brick walls, as well as the cupolas that represent the location where the smoke was released from the smoldering rocks that used to clean the beer barrels before being filled with beer. It's my vision to open this preserved space up to our community so that people can come together and celebrate in a setting that continues to tell the story of our past. From a logistical standpoint, I understand that parking for a 250-person event raises concerns. However, I plan to mandate shuttle service or valet parking in rented lots in order to eliminate this issue entirely. The current parking lot in our condo association offers 205 parking spaces shared by my building and 3 abutting buildings. My property is 12,000 square feet and can accommodate office space for up to 90 employees. So if I keep the second floor as office space, we can estimate that 90 cars may be parked in that lot in any given weekday. By converting the second floor to an event space, I would eliminate the daily need for 45 to 50 parking spaces, thereby decreasing daily traffic and freeing up parking for other tenants in the HOA. Anyone who hosts an event at my property will be contractually obligated to either transport guests via shuttles or hire our partner valet company. I anticipate that 90% of the events will utilize shuttles and 10% will utilize valet. Shuttles have become a very common part of the event planning process, especially with weddings, but also with some corporate events. For instance, couples today prefer to curate the entire event experience. Shuttles will pick up guests at their hotel, bring them to the ceremony location, which is often located somewhere on the other side of town. Then they'll transport the guests to the reception site, and then from the reception back into town for the after party. This relieves stress on both the couple as well as the guests, ensuring that everyone arrives in the right place at the right time. It eliminates any concern for guests driving under the influence, and it reflects a sustainable effort to reduce carbon emissions by eliminating 150 cars driving to the same place. I'm also in contact with multiple property owners on Islington Street to rent parking spaces if a client prefers to hire valet. Therefore, by launching this venue, I'm not only eliminating the need for 50 parking spaces on a daily basis, I'm also not requiring any spaces for guests attending events at my property whatsoever. Lastly, by launching this event venue, we open up new opportunities for tourism and commerce within our community. On average, 82% of wedding guests come from out of town and stay in their destination for at least the weekend. This means we'll be bringing more people into our town to stay in our inns, our hotels, dine at our restaurants, and shop at our local boutiques. Additionally, my part in this event venue is simply real estate. I will rent the space and mandate the transportation contracts. After that, hosts need to hire local event planners, local caterers, photographers, florists, rental furniture, and more. In fact, Jay McSherry, who I respect highly within the hospitality industry, just reached out to me last night to show his support and enthusiasm for this new event space and to express his interest in becoming a recommended caterer. Today, we have a surplus of vacant office space in our community, which negatively impacts property owners, overall property value, and the city as a whole. Repositioning the office space at 33 Jewel Court as an event venue will support our local businesses, increase tourism, and provide our town with a unique historic setting in which our community can come together to celebrate. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Right, thank you.
That concludes our presentation. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Mr. Rossi.
What's on the first floor?
I'm sorry.
What's on the first floor?
The first floor are both of my tenants. One is a web development firm, and the other one is an architectural firm. They've both been notified of our efforts to launch an event venue, are in full support.
And the sound engineer who looked at the sound penetration through the building, did he also look at the sound going down to the first floor?
He did, but we will make sure that these events do not take place while our tenants are in the building.
And maybe, I don't know if this is for you or for the planning department, but how does the planning department go about ascertaining that that building and the structure and the floor is adequate to support 250 people jumping up and down and dancing in a line dance and doing all that stuff? Because believe it or not, I've been in wedding venues that are, stacked floor over floor in the city, and the chandeliers are bouncing up and down, and it's pretty scary.
Yeah, the tenant fit-up is part of the building permit process where the inspections department will do a full evaluation of the use and the occupancy and all of that.
Shanti has also been through the properties already, looking at all points of egress and, identifying any areas where we need to pay more attention. So we are looking at that very closely.
You have to really love your relatives to stay in the venue when the chandeliers above
Right.
you are moving up and down by about 6 inches. But I love my relatives.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Ram?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the particular relief you're asking for, as has been pointed out, is the 50 to 250 patrons. You kind of indicated that 160-ish is more realistic. Have you had an analysis done yet to know what the fire code would actually allow you to have in that space? Is there some limit there as well?
I know that my contractor has spoken with, I believe it was Patrick, about getting some additional information. I also spoke with Chief Deputy Howe briefly. But again, we need to make sure that we go through those final assessments before, building permits are approved and everything gets approved. So that all of this is in the works.
Okay. And then in terms of, so you mentioned that you will require your clients to either use a shuttle or valet service. I guess, how do you enforce that?
Sure. I would put proof of contract in place, so they would have to show us the contracts. We would have partners Great Bay Limousine would be our shuttle partner, and Atlantic Parking Services would be our valet partner. They would have to show proof of contract for their event, and we would build into the contract a fine if they were to violate that contract, which would be paid directly to the condo association.
Okay. And then for your valet option, I mean, you said you're in conversation with some places on Islington Street. I guess I'm hard pressed to think of any spots even on Islington Street that have like a lot of open parking that would be available.
Sure. We are in conversations right now with Todd Baker. He manages the property over by Partners Bank. They have over 80 spots available in the back alone. He also has it's 900 and something Islington Street, which is just on the other side of my building, and they have several hundred spots. In addition to that, we're reaching out to the family that owns the building that Bank of America is in on Islington Street. They have the entire back parking lot that is currently full of snow that they're not using.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ms. March?
Yes, so in terms of what actually is, so there's just first of all, you just have 2 floors, just your tenants on the bottom, this is the second floor.
Yep.
And you talked in terms of this being the condominium association and there being 2 of the buildings that are a part of this. Which one of those 2 of the buildings? What are?
Sure. So Eric Chimberg, who is the president of the association, who signed the approval letter in support of this project, he owns 2 of the buildings. He owns the residential building that's closer to Mojo's and that area, and he owns the building with Otto's Pizza and Botanica. So those 2 are within our condo association. And the one in front of me, which is the smaller cupola house, I think it's called the Cooper House, that is owned by King Weinstein.
Okay. So when you say that you have, I guess, 209 spaces or something?
205, yeah.
5. Those, it seems like those belong to the people who live in those other residences, right?
So this is a shared lot for all 4 of our buildings. And the parking access was established in 2015 that granted the use of those 205 spaces on a first come, first served basis for all tenants within all buildings.
Okay. And so you'll be taking up, you would say, 29 spaces?
I don't think I'll even need 29 spaces. The only people that will be using spaces during these events are the people supporting the events, the caterers, the florists, the vendors that are supplying the service to the event, as well as sometimes there are a couple of people at an event who like to have their car there because they're bringing in additional stuff that they're keeping at the event, whether it's additional dresses or whatnot. So sometimes you'll have a couple of cars. So I anticipate the need for maybe 15 parking spaces total.
So the people, is there, for all the people in these buildings, and I recognize yours is a commercial building, but for the residents, are there enough spaces for every resident?
We have never once had a problem where nobody could find a parking spot. There is always an excess amount of parking, regardless of the time of day or the day of the week.
Okay. That has not been in my experience there since I've been there, I'll be honest. I'm just wondering about the fact that, I mean, I know there'll be valet and shuttles, but the fact that on the weekends, some of the residents may find themselves without their parking spaces that they expect.
But we wouldn't be using them because we would be bringing in the shuttles and the valet.
Okay. All right.
We really, I mean, what happens is there's exclusive spots directly to my building. There's 18 spots that are wrap around my building that say these spots are exclusive to this property. And then in addition to that, there are 24 spots behind the Cooperage building that's kind of that you access from the back street. Those are never utilized at any time. If we needed more than 10 or 12 spots, those are the spots we would be using.
Okay. I mean, because obviously, I don't know if you were here for our early application with Attorney Boson, but, you know, the increase in traffic and traffic circulation, that's a tough spot to sort of maneuver
Yep.
around in.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
and I would be curious to know, because it's 6,000 square foot, how many people actually could fit in there, but, okay, thank you.
Yeah. And it would be a maximum of 250, but again, we would not be allowing cars to come through the property.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone to speak in opposition to this petition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against this petition? Public hearing is closed. And
I would like a motion to approve the request for a special exception.
is there a second to Mr. Rossi's motion?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Going through the criteria for approval, this is a use that is permitted by special exception in this zone. There's no hazard to the public or adjacent property. There's nothing going on there with weddings or other events that should present a fire, explosion, or toxic material hazard. The type of use in this building that's being proposed is consistent generally with what's going on in this neighborhood. It's a fairly densely packed intermingling of entertainment, hospitality, and residential use. I do not believe that allowing this exception would have any detrimental impact, therefore, on the surrounding properties, particularly since a sound study was performed that really addresses the one potential concern with noise level, which I guess is part of criterion 3. No creation of traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity. I think this is particularly true with the reliance on a shuttle service, which would, transport lots of people with a smaller number of vehicles. It is a fairly congested traffic area. The lights, there's a traffic light right there. Everything's tight. The back roads there are very tight and very small. But the applicant has stated and stipulated that they would require the use of either valet or shuttle service parking, addressing item 4 adequately. This use is consistent with what else is going on there. There's no additional demand on municipal services, and there's no impact whatsoever on stormwater runoff or adjacent property, because there's no changes being done externally on the building. And that concludes my motion.
Thank you. Does the second have anything to add?
Yeah, I just add that I think that this application is a great idea, and particularly with the use of shuttles and with weddings involved and consuming alcohol being common, the shuttles are a great idea. That also addresses the traffic issue, and there's not a lot of other properties being used this way in town, so it's a great addition to the community.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there any discussion before we vote? Ms. Gefford?
I'm gonna bet you're gonna say what I want, so I'm gonna let you do it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Guys have a mind
We put a
map?
5 on that. There.
Discuss this first.
He's a mind reader.
So I will be supporting the motion. I do have some concerns with this, and I think Ms. Margerson has some concerns. But I think in terms of our threshold for special exception, the one item is no creation of a traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion. I think the applicant has presented a plan that on its surface could work. This does still need to go through the parking conditional use permit process with TAC and Planning Board. So I think it's going to get a much closer look there. I'm not entirely sure that's a slam dunk to get through that process. But I think the other thing that ultimately sways me on this is really the traffic congestion and the parking that we're talking about is really all essentially contained to this condo association. And so there's really no impact on the more general, broad public. I mean, I just don't see, there's really not a lot of available street parking or anything like that in that area that would somehow get taken up by cars for this venue. I think ultimately, if there is going to be a problem, it's going to be something that's internal to the condo association, and they're going to have to work it out. And I mean, it does sound like the applicant is trying to do the right thing, and has an enforcement tool that they can use against their clients should it become an issue. But I think with that's why I'm comfortable with it from the special exception threshold. But again, the conditional use permit may be a higher bar to pass, and we'll have to see what the planning board thinks on that.
Was that what you were going to say?
No, but it was better.
Okay.
May I just, I'm just going to ask the gentleman who made the motion whether the treatment of event traffic that is part of the application is a condition to the approval of the special exception, and whether it can be subject to further approval. I mean, and let me just explain. I think that some form of mitigation of parking concerns has to be tacked on to the special exception. I'm fine with what the applicant said. If it changes over the course of the other approval required, I defer to that, but I think I'm just wondering whether you'd be amenable to something that does that.
Thank you for calling me a gentleman. Yes, I will amend my motion to stipulate that, how do we word this? That the applicant will, well, let me think about this for a second. How's the planning department ever going to enforce that?
Right.
ML, I don't know that there's.
That event parking will be off-site via shuttle.
I just don't see how the planning department can get their, can wrap their arms around
That's the
that.
big issue. I mean, that's my big question on the application, that a key element. But I also take Mr. Rayham's point, the gentleman to your right, that
She doesn't know us very well.
there's adequate parking on the site, and it then becomes a condominium association issue.
If I may, Madam Chair, the reason why I'm not concerned about putting some additional stipulation on our approval is that this does require a conditional use permit from the planning board. I do believe those issues will be looked at in more detail than we're looking at them tonight. And I think there's going to be a lot of hard questions on their part as well, and maybe some requirements coming out of that process that will be attached to that conditional use permit on the parking. So that's why I'm not concerned about it. I think we have it covered. And I just think if we try and muddy it up with trying to add something to our special exception approval, it would only serve to make things worse.
Yes, I'm sorry, ML, I'm not against it in
No,
principle, but I'm not smart
I
enough to come up with
I agree.
something that can be enforced.
I just want to add one thing, that also this is off hours against much of the other traffic.
Yeah.
And
Maybe. I mean, again, that's another,
But there's
It could be Saturday
residences there.
afternoons.
Yes.
Yeah, there's
yes,
residences
but there are
there.
also other things that are more daytime uses. Anyway, it's going to it's going to need a conditional use permit. So if there are no other questions, I would be ready to call for a vote. Okay, let's start over here. Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Ms. Geffert?
yes, I like it.
And the chair votes yes.
Concerns.
Your tone of voice doesn't enter into the record, really. A little bit. Okay. So the next item of business is that one is not.
159 Madison.
I'm getting there. The request of, and you'll forgive my pronunciation, Tamara Rollo and Jeremy Rollo, for property located at 159 Madison Street, whereas relief is needed to construct a third-floor addition to the existing structure, which requires the following. 1, Variance from section 10.521 to allow an 8-foot left side yard where 10 is required. And 2, variance from section 10.321 to allow a non-conforming structure or building to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 145, Lot 54, and lies within the General Residence C District. Hello.
Good evening. Yes, you were close. It's Jeremy. I'm Jeremy Rouleau. My wife Tamara Rouleau. We are the proud owners of that property. We've been there since 2017. We have a beautiful young family. We have a 6-year-old going on 30, Greta, and an 18-month-old Vera. So 2 beautiful girls. And the existing home, having been built in 1792, we love the charm and character of that home. As you can imagine, times have changed in the functionality and space required in 1792 versus now to have a proper functioning space has changed. And we're looking to add a 3rd floor. So we're proposing a 3rd floor here in existing of the 2-story project so that our family can continue to grow and stay in our lovely community. From a variance perspective, right, the criteria, granting this variance will not be contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance observed in the improvements of the existing property, which was built in 1792. Improvements include only a 3rd floor expansion, which will allow the homeowners to improve the functionality and aesthetic of the existing home. This request is in alliance with similar properties in the neighborhood who have also improved the quality of their property and the benefit of everyone in the community. Substantial justice will be done so a small family, ours, can continue to grow and invest in their home and neighborhood as their neighbors have kindly have. Allowing this variance releases undue burden that allows the homeowner to make improvements to the property, which will update a living space to be more functional for the time period in which we live in without any detrimental effect to the neighborhood or any harm to the public interest. By granting this variance, the values of the surrounding properties will not be diminished for said improvements. Through proper design, construction, and permitting process, it will provide the same enhancements and improvements in value that we have benefited from other like-kind properties that have followed before us in surrounding neighborhood. And then as far as the hardship, due to unique circumstances of this property, a variance is reasonable and would not alter the aesthetic character of the neighborhood. The suggested improvements will allow a small family to upgrade our home in benefit of the neighborhood and support of the aesthetic and value that everyone in the community has attempted to maintain. So again, we're not extending the footprint of our existing structure at all. And so from a maximum building coverage perspective, we'll remain in compliance there. And we have around 8 feet of clearance on our side of the property where 10 is required, and where the 2 floors already existing fall under grandfathered under the clause, and so the 3rd floor would align with that existing footprint. That's what I have, short and sweet.
Okay. Questions? Mr.
Yeah, I just want to validate on page 124 of our packet, which is you have sort of the proposed sections, proposed street facing, which is in the lower left-hand corner there. Just to reinforce to the board, the only relief that you need is for that sort of little blue shaded section on that diagram, correct? That's all you're asking
That's
for
it,
from
correct.
us.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone to speak in favor of this petition?
So in addition, we do have the support of our neighbors on the left and right of us, which is in the
We
packet.
do have those. You might.
One of them was here for a little bit,
Yeah,
but
we have 3 letters of support in our packet.
So thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Anyone to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against? Okay. Public hearing is closed.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the application as presented and advertised.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Rossi.
The spirit of the ordinance, and particularly the nature of the setbacks, is to preserve light and air in surrounding properties. The building and the property, the building's already a tall, narrow, and deep structure. That whatever shade is cast on the surrounding properties will not be any greater based on the small variance being requested here. And so criteria 1 and 2 were satisfied. Granting this variance would do substantial justice in that there is no loss to the public that would outweigh the benefit to the applicant should the variance be granted. It would not diminish the value of the surrounding properties. I think that the plan that's been presented to us is consistent with what's in the neighborhood generally. It would not have any detrimental impact on the surrounding properties. It probably will enhance the value of the immediate neighboring properties. So that criterion is satisfied. With regard to hardship and special conditions of the property, the special condition is that the exact footprint of the floor plan for the third floor, only a small portion of which requires zoning ordinance relief, already exists in the historic structure that is on that site, and that is the special condition that makes it quite reasonable to get this variance, and it would be quite unreasonable to require that his addition of the third floor would not be permitted to run along the current outline of the structure. So for those reasons, I would say that this variance should be approved.
Okay. Does the second have anything to add? No, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, if not, a yes vote approves the project. Mr. Geffert?
Yes.
Oh, God. Beth?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So you are approved. Sorry, Beth, I just couldn't think of more. Just
Well, that was when my friend used to live in the house. It had dirt floors. Don't know if it still does.
Just call me Her Majesty.
Okay, I will do that. The next item is item F, the request of Riggs Enterprises LLC, owner for property located at 822 Route 1 bypass, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing structure and construct a new commercial building which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.113.20 to allow parking spaces between the principal building and a street. Variance from section 10.1113.41 for parking located 0 feet from the lot line where 20 feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 160, Lot 29, and lies within the Business B District. Hello.
Good evening, members of the board. Monica Kaiser from Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley, and Roberts to speak to this application. With me is Alex Ross from Ross Engineering and Dave Grisbowski, who is the contractor for Riggs Enterprises working on this. Just a slight correction out of the gate. If I said demolish somewhere, I was incorrect. The proposal is simply, I checked the memorandum tonight, that this proposal is to simply expand the existing building.
That's
Okay.
It is?
Thank you.
Is it being demolished?
Okay.
Yes.
It looks very different.
So we will keep this as is.
Yes, sorry,
Okay,
my
no,
bad.
we're in luck. It's all
Good
working.
call, Steph. All right, so to just orient you to the site, there is a picture in the packet. There's an overhead satellite, and then do you have a picture of the front of the store?
Yes.
My picture didn't render well in my packet, but I assume, I don't know if you want to bring that up or if everyone's seen it. But essentially, there's a building there. It used to be a gas station. There were big there was a gas pump and a big roof overhang of the gas pumps. That's all been removed, and this is what's left on the site. That building is not being used right now. It's just a vacant space. The proposal is to establish essentially some sort of convenience store situation, and the new building will be bigger than the existing building. And it will, if you go back to the site plan, that's going to be the configuration in the new building. Old top button, okay. So the proposal does increase the size of this building a little bit toward the back. There's no relief required here. Our lot line goes all the way back here to this thick black line. And the area in between here is green and vegetated, and there is a fence as well. So we fully meet the rear setback, and nothing is proposed in that area. And I'm told that is of some comfort to some people in the neighborhood who have found that there's been some sort of nefarious or transient activity on this property, particularly in the area behind the building. So the proposal to increase the size of the building and tuck it back toward the back sort of cuts off access to people sort of hiding behind the building and that sort of thing. We're here today solely for two reasons. One is that we have parking between our building and the bypass, and the other because of these numbered spots here in the front. There are 7 parking spaces in the front setback. Now, if you go back to the existing condition plan, oh, that was fast. You'll see, again, the property isn't being used essentially for business purposes, but in times past, it's kind of been a free-for-all in the parking department, and people have generally parked. They've come in for gas. They've parked in this area outside the lot line in the right-of-way behind this curb cut, and there aren't delineated spaces anywhere else on the lot. So we think having the delineated 7 parking spaces is an improvement. Some specific conditions affecting this lot are that it takes traffic from Burkett Street out to the bypass. The street, while Burkett Street sort of ends at the property, it's common that people drive through to access the bypass. They also, sometimes people have traversed through to the Penguin business through this area here. Our proposal is going to sort of seal that up so that the traffic comes in and either goes out to the bypass, or they come in and they go on the new site plan stuff. They go to one of the existing parking spaces to utilize the business. Also, on this property, there is an easement which provides access to this property here. So this property has no curb cut of its own and is accessed by people who drive in through the property at issue to enter. So the other reason to put the parking spaces here in the front is to sort of mimic the condition here. And this is a fully site-approved plan a couple years back. I think it always had existing spaces in the front setback, so it might not have needed relief at the time of its previous site plan approval. But those spaces are there now, and there is a fair amount of traffic between the properties because, again, that's the only way to access that lot. So part of what we wanted to do in designing this space is to keep a reasonable aisle of traffic for circulation purposes going from one lot to the other lot, through out to the bypass and through out to Burkett. So given the Burkett traffic that comes in, we cannot put parking in this side area along the side lot line. We are prohibited from utilizing the area behind the building for parking or vehicular circulation because it borders a couple of residential properties. And we obviously can't put any parking here because we'll seal off this property. So that's how we've come up with the parking spaces. In the front, we've expanded and improved that curbing so that there's really a clearly defined area. You're getting the cars that would have parked perhaps in this little area in between the former curb cut and the traveled portion of the road. You're keeping them all entirely sort of on the lot. And then as you can also see, there is some reasonable distance to the actual traveled portion of the right-of-way as well. So in terms of a sightline issue, we would assert that the sightlines are not going to be impacted for anybody sort of coming through and trying to turn out because there's enough space in front of the parking where people will be able to get a clear view. A couple other things about the project, really not necessarily your concern, but there is a drain line that goes through the properties. It goes under the existing building, I believe now, and that is going to be redone and improved at significant expense to the applicant, and it's going to be relocated and go sort of behind the building, and that's all going to be done new. Even on this lot, Alex, on the other lot as well?
Correct.
Yeah, so it's the owner of this lot purchased this lot last year, so some of that redevelopment will involve both lots in terms of the drain line. This property over here at the bottom has already been sort of developed and has an existing business in it, but the drain line that runs behind that building will be replaced, as well as the drain line on our property. That's the proposal. I know it's quite late. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think I've addressed the variance criteria in the memorandum. To just go through it quickly, starting with the first two criteria, not contrary to the public interest, spirit of the ordinance is observed. I've sort of gone through and laid out some specific objectives of the ordinance and how this proposal meets those objectives, referring back, of course, to the Malachi Glen case, and the test is whether granting the variance would unduly and to a marked degree conflict to such a degree that it violates the ordinance's basic zoning objectives. Conflict alone is not enough. So I've taken through the purposes of the ordinance and the specific objectives, and I think given what I've laid out and what is included here on page 2 of the memorandum at least addresses and fulfills that criteria, and also makes the case clearly that the variances are required because the available parking spaces are limited by these other factors on the site. Substantial justice is done. Test is if there's no benefit to the public that would outweigh the hardship to the applicant, the factor's satisfied. Given the improvements on the site, the maintenance of traffic flow on the site, the improvements to safety on the site, from having it be active, developed, utilized, and not having any space behind the building for vagrants, those are all a benefit to the public and to the surrounding area. We'll be able to continue, people will be able to continue to utilize Burkett Street as they have, and that is also a benefit to the public. No diminishment to the value of surrounding properties. We've got a commercial use, commercial zone, end of story there. The maintenance of the vegetated buffer to the residential properties also speaks to that. Special conditions I've outlined in terms of the easement and Burkett Street. No fair and substantial relationship. When we talk about requirements relating to where parking spaces are to be located, the purposes is to preserve the character of the area, maintain sight lines, and reduce traffic conflicts. We think those purposes are met here. It's a commercially used site. It seems reasonable to park in front of the store that you're going to go in, but also we are prohibited in this instance from parking behind the building. And again, the sight lines seem to be addressed and quite adequate. The proposed use is reasonable, permitted use, end of story there. So Alex Ross is here to answer any specific questions. And I apologize for the error about the addition versus the demolition, but there we
We know
go.
where we are now. That's good. Are there questions? Mr. Ram?
Yes, thank you. So just out of curiosity, the Burkett Street access, is there like a right-of-way or an easement that allows vehicles to traverse, or is it really the benevolence of the property owner that creates that passageway?
Yeah, so there is no written recorded easement or right-of-way. Throughout history, it has been used that way, and this owner would like to allow that to continue. It's mostly, back in that neighborhood from Dennett coming up. And just recently, they did do some work removing the underground tanks. So they had to block that off just for a couple of weeks, but it was noticeable. Everyone came up and said, how do we get through here? So he'd like to keep that open.
Okay. I was just trying to understand, if there was something that obligated them, but it doesn't sound it. It's really purely out of the benevolence of the property owner. Okay.
Correct.
Interesting. I've used it many times myself. It's very.
I think, too, that's also a way that the neighborhood can access the store as well. So there is a benefit for the business person to do that as well.
Any other questions? Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this petition? We'll call it 2, 4, or against, and you may come up. Sure. You have to come to the mic and tell us who you are.
And where you live?
Yeah.
My name's John Allard. I live on Burkett, just
Okay.
a couple of houses away from this.
Okay.
And I'm pretty surprised to find out that Burkett Street doesn't go all the way to the bypass. We've been using it as if it was, I'd like to know what kind of store you guys are putting in?
The store that's existing now on the other side, the old Mama D's.
Yeah, well, the old.
I'm sorry,
the
you
old-
have to,
Actually,
excuse
yeah,
me, you need to speak to us.
And
Oh, I'm sorry.
We'll answer after you get out.
Yeah.
So,
All
Mr.
right, okay.
Mr.
So
Allard-
what the store is, and the other thing I'd like to mention is the folks that use that, we come off the bypass, and, it's not as bad when you're coming from Burkett, but when you're coming
Going
off the
out, right.
bypass, people believe that's a street. And I guess I can't speak for all people, but the folks that, I believe it is. And I think it'd be wise to do some kind of,
Speak to us and they can hear you.
yeah, I think it'd be wise to do some kind of, something that, the people that come out of that parking lot don't just roll right out into that street. Well, it's not a street, it's a whole parking lot, but there's a lot of people that think it's a street. I think you're begging for an accident there, because right now, especially since they removed the pumps, people just come right across from the city, which is the little store that's, the other
okay,
store
yeah.
that's there. They just come right across that parking lot and right into what we thought was Burkett. You're going to get people coming off the bypass, possibly, and coming into that parking lot thinking it's a street. That's what everybody, I think, I'm bringing this to the neighborhood because I don't think anybody knew that was a part of the
This
property.
still has to go to TAC and the planning board, so there will be review of what concerns you.
Okay, Cooper.
Okay.
Super.
Good, thank you.
I just want to say we actually went to TAC already, and we got some feedback about the application, and they directed us here. But certainly, we do still have to go to full site review.
Okay, good. Well, I hope you'll keep this concern in mind.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. 2, 4, or against? Public hearing is closed.
So can I ask a question? Steph?
Of course.
No.
So the number of parking spots here is based on the size of the building. Building hasn't been approved through site review, so. So we're being asked to grant a variance because the parking spots that are closest to the bypass are too close to the bypass. But the need for those parking spots relates directly to the size of the building. And so it hasn't gone
Or
through
the
site
use
plan
of the
review.
building.
Well, yes, I apologize.
no,
Retail,
building, yeah.
right, retail plus the size. I mean, I guess we can approve it, and then if something changes, well, they'll have extra parking, if we choose.
I'm going to give my opinion early.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious.
It's always an issue for us when parking is right up against the street, but it's the bypass.
Right, and
It's
it's
the
right-
norm.
and
And
it's-
the trade-off, it seems to me, is having the building move back further to benefit the homeowners.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's a fair trade-off. I'm just saying, Mr.
But
Ring.
I think
Yep.
we, well, I'll let
Specifically to
Steph-
Ms. Geffert's
Yeah.
concern, however, so, as the longest-serving member of the board, this is always an issue. Obviously, there's multiple boards that
comes
need
first?
to hear these things. There's always the potential for changes between them. I remember arguments of, it should go to the HDC first. No, it should go to the planning board first. No, I called it land use board ping pong, right? At some point in time, you got to settle on where you think the whole project is going, and then, right, if some changes come along, which is pretty rare, that has to come back and get some kind of additional approval. It does happen, but it's far from the majority. So typically, this board is first because there's sort of a one and done. A lot of the others, if you don't get through this board, then a lot of the others are more protracted processes. So why would you want to put yourself through the really protracted processes if you're just going to lose the one and done board right up
Thank
front?
you.
It's us, the one and done board.
We're the one and done board. Yeah.
And I would think that, I mean, the building is the representation, it's the presentation, and it's as advertised, and the square footage drives the parking spaces in the front. I mean, and I would think that if the building changes and there's need for less parking spaces in the front, even though this is not a parking variance, it's a lot line, you know, I would think that we'd be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd like to add my standard stipulation of, you know, if the design and the structure changes as a result of TAC and planning board review, that's understood by the board.
Yeah, you don't get much traction on that one, Steph. We don't seem to take you
You
up
don't,
on it,
right,
but.
right. Motion, further discussion? Yes.
I'll do a little discussion if I can. So earlier this evening, we had a lot of heartache, especially from me, on, a parking like right up against the property line. I do believe there are some unique circumstances here that make me feel much better about it. First of all, is the easements for the neighboring property. There's basically no way that you could move the building to the front and still have the entrances and exits able to support that easement. So I think that the applicant is being driven back. Additionally, with the, very close residential properties right behind this property, unlike the one that we had disapproved earlier this evening, I do think that creates another factor of why you don't want the parking in the back. And as has been pointed out by the applicant, I mean, it's kind of like, it creates sort of like a darkened area back there that would then potentially be a source for nefarious conduct, I think the term was.
You don't hear that word here often.
I like it, nefarious. So I think those things tip me in the balance of what the applicant is asking for makes sense for this particular application.
Ms. Murchison.
And I would say I had the same problems Mr. Ram did, my gentleman way over to the left. But because for the previous application, but it was a much longer,
Also
many
true.
more cars. And also sort of introducing something that wasn't there before. Here, on the other side, I did go to this site today, and now I know why people were looking at me weird, given that there's nefarious conduct. Like, maybe I was there to buy something. I'm like, why am I attracting attention? But I there is parking on the other part of that lot, or it's a different lot, but I think with the improvements as to the layout of this lot and the fact that it's going to go through TAC and Planning Board, I think those concerns for me are definitely alleviated, so.
Excellent. Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
Do I have to do this?
Would someone like to?
We've been carrying the
Yeah,
weight
you-
all evening, so
I don't
That's why
do
you're the
motions.
gentleman.
That's why I'm
To our
chair.
left.
You can.
Do you want to try it? No.
Actually, I am having, my computer's dying, and I may not get all the criteria.
Okay.
So better you than I.
So if I can get,
you're going to do.
All right, Madam Chair,
Okay. I can't find my sheet.
I will, Jeez. I will make a motion to accept to grant the requested variances as
here it is.
presented and advertised.
Is there a second before we continue?
Second.
Thank you.
Okay.
I've got my criteria to meet.
All right, so to our criteria, we had some discussion on this. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. Again, 0-foot setbacks traditionally are something that this board, looks at pretty carefully. It is a significant change from what is being asked for. However, I do believe, despite the gross nature of what it is from a numerical standpoint, it's in practice, looking at the actual real situation that's built up there. It does make sense to allow the parking to go right up against the property line, which is then a short distance from the Route 1 bypass, because of the unique sort of site conditions that we have here and what's being driven with the need to honor the access rights to the neighboring property that is granted through on this property. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. So that's our balancing test. Is there anything that would be in the public interest that outweighs the applicant's desire? I think there are actually some additional benefits to what the applicant is asking for in terms of moving the building towards the back of the property that sort of is in the public interest of the property owners along the Dennett Street corridor. So I think that combined with this really, it's nice to move things closer to the property line, but not necessarily what we. Not outweighing some of the other benefits that we're seeing here by moving the building towards the back. Granting the variance to not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Again, this is essentially consistent with all the other surrounding properties that are there. Creating another sort of business, small business structure on the property. It's not overburdening it. It's essentially a one-story structure that's being put on there. A business is similar to others in the area. In fact, it looks like it's the business right next door that's moving to a slightly larger location. So it's not anything that's introducing a new factor. So there's nothing to believe that surrounding properties would be affected. And then special conditions of this property, again, butted up right up against a residential neighborhood, is burdened by an easement for access, is also somewhat burdened by this perception that Burkett Street runs right up to the Route 1 bypass. The applicant is still trying to honor that. So those are some of the special conditions that sort of driving the site plan. They are required to provide 18 parking spots. The only realistic way to put them on the property is in the location shown, and in essence to provide the necessary back out space, turning lanes, etc. That really sort of forces the parking spots right up along the property line. And it's a reasonable use of the property. So with that, I recommend approval.
Does the second have anything to add?
Just that the parking against the bypass continues what's on the next door property with, is it Gary's Liquors?
No, it's also in the city.
It was Gary's. It's now City.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm 10 years old or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, but it continues what's adjacent.
It is. It doesn't change the streetscape in any way.
Agreed.
A lovely streetscape of the US.
It's called still a streetscape.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay, so.
I'm just wondering if Mama D's is going to come back.
Oh, boy.
Don't hold your breath. It still exists someplace, though, right?
Someplace.
Okay, a yes vote allows the building to go through. Ms. Geffert?
Yes.
Ms. Morgeson?
Yes.
Mr. Ram?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So you are good to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Could you, off the record, could you show him the picture? Thank you.
No.
Okay, so, any new business? Any new business? Okay, then what's the next thing?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a
Second.
second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We're done.